Hello everyone, Mr. E here, and today I'll be discussing Veteran. In fact, I imagine I'll be discussing Veteran quite a lot, because what I'm going to be doing is going through all of the talents in his tree, and giving them S through D rankings, just as I did with Oghren about a month ago. And the reasoning behind this is multifold. My first reason is I've been talking a lot about the weapons and balance thereof in the game lately, and I landed upon the plasma gun, because whenever we're talking balance in a game like Darktide or in any sort of game, you cannot balance around the absolute upper outliers of the game. We can't make everything as good as the plasma gun, because the plasma gun is just so absurdly good, right? If we buffed everything else to that standard, weapons would have to be crazy. So I think that it's very fair to say that plasma gun needs to be brought down a little bit, and at the same time we should also see a rebalance of some lesser used abilities in the game. I think Veteran is first and foremost on that list. He has two abilities that are almost never used, and one of the reasons they're almost never used is because they are completely overshadowed by an oppressively overpowered ability in Voice of Command. So when we talk about Voice of Command later on in this video, I'll be discussing how much I think it should be nerfed, and at the same time the other two abilities need to be brought up. And I fully realize that if I get my wish, and if we are to balance the Veteran class and balance ranged weapons in general, well, the Veteran's gonna really suffer if he doesn't get something sweet out of the deal. He's already not in a great position. If you watch my recent video where I compared the different classes' power levels, I put Veteran in third place, only just ahead of the Psyker, and that's with the power of the plasma gun and Shout on his side. If he loses these two things, or if these things see considerable reductions, then he's absolutely going into fourth place. He's already struggling to hold on to his relevancy with new Oghren being as powerhouse as it is, and with the nerf to his ammo regeneration aura. All of those things, plus his general inflexibility in terms of ultimate usage in higher level content, all adds up to the Veteran not exactly being in great shape. And if you had to give me the choice between reworking Veteran or reworking Zealot at this current stage of the game, I really couldn't pick. I think both of them need that help, need a restructuring of the talent tree, but for different reasons. So I'll be talking about Zealot on a later date, but for today, let's just talk about Veteran. And I want to draw your attention to a couple of things, meta commentary wise, when we're going through this talent tree. The first one that I'd like to draw your attention to is how I will be rating these nodes and the S through D rankings. I'm certain that most of you are familiar with these, but D is do not take, basically. C is suboptimal. It's going to hurt your build to take it. It generally just could be spent better elsewhere, but it's not an absolute terrible pointless point. B is perfectly fine. It's neither helping you nor hurting you. A lot of pass-through points that you need to get to other portions of a tree will be awarded Bs. A is a positive. It's a solid talent, but falls just a little bit short of our absolute cream of the crop, the nodes that every build should be including, the S tier nodes. And what I want you to look at when I'm talking about the S through D tiers is the general distribution of them on the Veteran tree. Because up in this top part of the tree, near the the first points that you'll spend, I'm going to be very critical, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, there's not that many good nodes up here, but two, there's a lot of good nodes at the bottom of the tree, and so therefore you need to be pathing efficiently on the top part of the tree in order to save points for those talents that are later on, because there's so many good nodes down in this general region of the tree. Not necessarily the Keystones, we'll get to talking about that, but a lot of these nodes, these blue nodes in this region, are powerful even by modern standards, like with Oghren being introduced and stuff. So be on the lookout for that, and also be on the lookout, keeping you in the forefront of your mind, what is the Veteran's class identity supposed to be? In my mind, the Veteran's class identity is supposed to be the strongest user of ranged weapons. He's supposed to be shelling out lots and lots of ranged damage. And when you keep that in mind and reflect on the actual talents that are present in the Veteran's tree, you start to see a pattern emerge, which is that there's really not a whole lot here in terms of actually buffing his use of ranged weapons. Many of his talents buff melee like as much or more, and so we don't see a class that's absolutely dominant in the use of certain weapon types. He's certainly got good grenade perks, but yeah, nothing really stands out for weapon usage, and I think that's a real shortcoming of the veteran tree. But we'll talk about like specific changes I would make to the tree on a later date. For now, let's go ahead and get started ranking the entire veteran talent tree. Now, before I begin ranking the first nodes on the tree, if I could just appeal to you as a viewer quickly, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, it would be greatly appreciated. It really helps me out in the algorithm, helps get more eyes on the content, helps more people get engaged with Darktide, which is obviously a game that we all love. And if you like this long form analytical content and you have some sort of ideas or constructive feedback on how I could do this or do it better for something else, let me know down in the comments. That's also great. And throw a like while you're at it. I really appreciate all the things you do to help feed the almighty YouTube algorithm. Okay, let's get on with the video. Right at the top of the tree, we have Long Shot. Deal up to 20% ranged base damage, or plus 20% ranged base damage. This bonus is reduced the nearer you are to the target. So the node on its own, on its face, sounds really good. 20% ranged base damage sounds awesome. The problem is that reduction is very steep. Most engagements in Darktide are not at the long range that's going to give you that plus 20%. In fact, just for some perspective, if you stand in the simulacrum or the Psychanium, and you know how there's like those pillars around the perimeter of the area, it takes about the distance from one side of that circle to the other in order to give you the full 20% range base damage on this passive. So any enemies that are like in closer medium range, you are averaging just a couple of percent base damage increase, which is really not worth it, because going in this direction at the top of the tree is generally kind of a mistake. And remember, I said I was going to be more critical at the top of the tree, because we need to be choosing one path to get through this top part of the tree, and only one path. We do not have the extra points to splurge choosing multiple things at the top here. So this one for me is going to get a C tier ranking, because it's just very suboptimal. It goes in the wrong path, and so it loses points there, and that damage bonus is very finicky, especially considering there's some maps where you straight up will never have enemies that are far enough away to get that sort of bonus. Then we have this nice little node in the center, Close Order Drill, up to 33% toughness damage reduction, the more allies in coherency. This node gets a solid A tier ranking for me. Now this node doesn't see that much pick anymore, because this middle path has fallen out of like the absolute meta, but I still think it's very strong. And this node gives just some nice toughness damage reduction for staying near your allies, which is the thing you already want to be doing, so you can share the benefits of your shout with your team. And it's just free. You don't have to think about it, and it's going to allow you to keep your toughness up that much better. Over here on the right, we have One Motion, 25% weapon swap speed. This is a solid buff. I'm going to give it a B tier, because it is on the way to something very valuable that I think many people will enjoy taking, but it's not really like all that impressive or all that powerful. It's certainly good into the one build that I think is probably the most powerful veteran build in the game, which we'll talk about at the end, but with Weapon Specialist, where you are swapping back and forth very quickly. But 25% weapon swap speed, I don't think I've ever really noticed that much, swap speed in general. I tend to avoid it personally, so maybe I'm just biased against it, but I think a B tier is a fine ranking for it. Then coming back the other way, the whole reason we go in this direction is Out for Blood. Your kills replenish an additional 5% toughness. This is a great hallmark of an S tier talent here. An additional 5% toughness on all kills. Now for classes in general, the only way you replenish toughness by kills is by getting melee kills. Each melee kill replenishes 5% normally, unless you've taken some talent for it. With this talent, all of your melee kills now replenish 10%, and all of your ranged kills or kills to environmental or damage over time effects also replenish that 5%, which is crazy good when you take into account the fact that the veteran has shredder grenades and has plasma gun and has burn from his recon las gun. All those things can finish off enemies and count toward this 5% toughness replenishment, which is very, very nice since it can help you to boost your toughness back up when you have your gold buff running. So yeah, just like generally giving you so much more toughness, and it works amazingly into hordes because you can just instantly blow up a bunch of horde and get all of your toughness back instantly. Really, really good solid talent there. Then we have Tactical Reload, 25% reload speed if your weapon contains ammo. Now this is funny for meme builds, like if you're doing a revolver or something, but you know, it's not necessary. Remember, we have to be saving points at the top part of the tree here. You need to pick one path and stick with it. So there's no reason. You are definitely taking this one. You're definitely taking Out for Blood. There is zero reason why you would come over here and take this one as well. So I'm going to be giving it a C tier just because also there aren't a whole lot of weapons that really rely on that reload speed. And again, weapon specialists exist. So reloading in itself is kind of also a moot point. Okay, in the middle here, Confirmed Kill. Replenish 10% toughness on elite or specialist enemy kill, and a further 20% toughness over 10 seconds. Now, this one, I also think this is an S tier talent. This is a very, very strong talent. It is not quite as S tier. I don't have an extra tier for it. It's not quite as S tier as Out for Blood is, but it is a very strong talent. The higher a difficulty you're playing on, obviously the more value this is going to get, because it's going to give you you know, an activation every time you kill an elite or a specialist, which is very, very often. And that ability to just have that trickling effect of toughness is actually the more important part, not the instant toughness. It's the trickling toughness, because that will continually bump your gold toughness back over its threshold. So if you're playing in like low rank games, you know, below like high havocs, I actually think this middle path is probably better. You're sticking close with your team, and you are regenerating toughness in such a way that it makes it very, very hard for the enemies to break your toughness. If you're playing on a high level of skill, then one motion becomes better because you're swapping more efficiently to blast targets with your plasma rifle, usually is the weapon you're using here. And Out for Blood generates more value because occasionally you will take big wallops on high difficulties and your toughness will be broken or nearly broken, and you'll need to regenerate it very quickly. And while this talent does it slowly, this talent can do it in an instant if you can kill some enemies really quickly. So I think Confirmed Kill is S tier, but in a different sort of way than the other S tier one we just talked about. Charismatic, on the other hand, I think this is a D tier. Aura Radius, it's up to your allies to stick with you, right? You're a ranged attacker, so this is a talent that doesn't help you as much as it does your allies, and it really doesn't even help them that much. Like, you should generally, as a team, try to be playing around your veteran, because veterans, you know, they're a ranged class. They're going to be shooting and they're going to be shouting from the position that they're at. You can't be an Ogryn who's frontlining or a Zealot who's diving the back line and get all mad when your veteran doesn't have Charismatic to give them the aura radius so that you can, give them more ammo or something. I think aura in general in this game is better left avoided in terms of talents. Over here we've got Volley Adept, reload speed on specialist or enemy kill, or specialist or elite enemy kill, 30% reload speed in fact. This is another C tier talent. It's just not something that you really need. It can... Nah, I just can't in all good conscience say that this is any good in any build that's currently in the meta at all, because this is actually really kick-ass if you are enjoying Executioner Stance, because it can allow you to reload a weapon fast enough that you can continue to chain the kills for your Executioner Stance, but Executioner Stance is just not used because it's just nowhere near as good as Shout. So outside of meme builds, avoid it. Exhilarating Takedown, replenish 15% toughness and 10% and gain 10% toughness damage reduction for 8 seconds on ranged weak spot kill, stacks 3 times. So this is different than Confirmed kill. Confirmed kill gives you you cap out at 2% toughness per second over that 10 seconds. It refreshes every time you kill an elite or specialist, so it doesn't stack, because that would be absurd. But this one, Exhilarating Takedown, does stack. It gives you up to 30% toughness damage reduction, which is nice, and you can be regenerating, let's see, about 6.5% of your toughness every second if you have this fully stacked. If you're chaining weak spot kills, it's very, very solid. What I would love to see is a day where this sort of talent, where, like, obviously these talents, this would be awesome, and was awesome back in the day when, like, revolver sniping and stuff like that, and using Executioner's Stance was considered good, and it's good at low level play. But I would love to see it, some buffs to Executioner's Stance and getting sharpshooting back into the meta, where nailing range weak spot kills like this could be like the focus of the build, rather than just blasting everything at chest level and throwing grenades and everything. Because right now the veteran is trying to compete in what I think is a world dominated by psychers and ogrins in terms of splash damage, by throwing grenades and blasting plasma guns into your enemy's chest cavities, when they should really be aiming for heads and getting stuff like this to have value. All that ramble to say that I think this is an A tier ability. Oops, wrong thing to press. I think this is an A tier ability. Unfortunately, it's trapped behind a C tier ability at the top, or a C tier talent, and there's just generally not that much reason to take it, because toughness regeneration on the whole isn't a big problem for veteran, especially once you have Out for Blood. Okay, coming down here to the blitzes. Well, I'm certain that you guys can figure out where this is going. First, on the left here, we have the Shredder Frag Grenade, the poster boy for an S tier grenade in the game. The Shredder Frag Grenade not only has a very, very absurdly high level of stagger, knocking crushers fully to the ground, it also applies stacks of bleed, 6 stack, which is a pretty solid amount of bleed, and it does damage on its own. You get 3 of them, and they're very easy to toss out like they're landmines. They're a great disruption tool. It can cause a boss to break out of its animation, put down an ally, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's the best veteran grenade, hands down. The fact that it has the most stacks tied with the smoke grenade, but the fact that it has 3 stacks of grenade is really, really important because of the way that veteran regenerates grenades, which we'll get to in a second. But 3 is sort of like the sweet spot, it's the bare minimum of number of grenades you want to have for a grenade to be really, really good. And I don't know any way to sell it anymore, but yeah, throwing a ton of shredder grenades in a game will skyrocket your damage. If you're throwing these on cooldown as soon as you get them and throwing them into big masses of enemies, you will have so much damage from these things. They generate a ton of value, and so that's why there's a build you can build. Big Dom's, I think he's more the person who's probably most famous for popularizing these grenadier veteran builds. Very solid because this shredder is so good. Then we got crack grenades. Crack grenades. Crack grenades, I see a lot of newer players running them, but I have to give crack grenades the C here. Oops, the C tier. So crack grenades, they have a couple of problems. One is their 2 crack grenade capacity. That is a problem for grenade regeneration in this game. If you want to use this to be like a main form of damage, you basically end up having to take the where is it, right here, the additional grenade talent for 3 grenades. And I guess this is as good a time as any to get into it. So the veteran has this very, very powerful talent that I can't seem to click on because my freaking Games Lantern won't buffer. There we go. Called Demolition Stockpile. Pretty much every build is going to be taking this. I'm going to be ranking it S tier in a few minutes here. This generates 1 grenade every 60 seconds. If you ever cap your grenades, this generation effect cancels, and you lose all progress towards the next grenade. So your goal as the veteran is to never be capped on grenades, because if you're capped for even 1 second, you lose all your progress towards a free grenade. So your goal as veteran is to just have open space in your pack for grenades. And this would be easy, right? This would be perfectly fine. You could have one crack grenade, and then the next one would generate, and you could throw it instantly, and then you wouldn't miss out on barely any time, right? The problem is that there is also another S tier ability down here called Demolition Team, and this gives you this chance to replenish grenades whenever you or an ally in coherency kills an elite or specialist enemy. 5% chance. So they could go off at any time. And so when this goes off, you want to be making use of it. You want to get a free grenade. So in order to get a free grenade, you need to have empty space in order to get that grenade. So when you're playing with crack grenades, you don't have that empty space unless you have 0 crack grenades in your hands. And then if Demolition Team generates 1, you're okay. But what if it generates 2? Then it cancels out the timer on your demolition stockpile. So this is where shredder grenades are awesome for having that 3 base charge, is because you can throw 2 and you'll still have 1 in case you need to pull it out and, you know, do a I Am Legend or something like that. But you'll have that 1, or you can throw that last one, and then you have plenty of space in your bags for Demolition Team to pop off and generate you a bunch of extra grenades, and you have a very low chance of maxing out and not having any room for Demolition Stockpile to print one for you. So choosing this talent is going to overall lower the amount of grenades that you get throughout the game just by virtue of capping you on grenades. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say about it. The second thing I want to say about crack grenades is they have a very, very small radius in which they do their damage, and that's obviously not great. Some of the best things about grenades in this game, specifically shredder grenades and rumbler grenades, which I think are the top 2 grenades you could probably be using right now, are the amount of disruption that they give. And crack grenades will not generally save you in a clutch situation where you're surrounded, and shredder grenades absolutely will. The crack grenades just cannot be used in the same way where you like drop them on your feet and get that big cool landmine effect where you blast and create some space for yourself, which I think is a big selling point of shredder grenades. And then the final thing about the crack grenade is that it just generally doesn't generate that much DPS. Like, yes, you can blow up a boss with it, you can snipe a couple of crushers with it, but you could also just as easily snipe the crushers with your fucking plasma gun or your dueling sword at this point, and bosses will get killed by anybody. You don't need to be devoting your grenades to killing bosses, specifically only monstrous bosses, because these don't do anything to captains, really, you know, compared to, like, you know, actually just bonking them with a Ogre or something. So I just can't in all good conscience say that people should be taking crack grenades. They will not generate that much damage for you. If you're running crack grenades in your game, you will see a considerably lower damage number at the end of the game than you will with shredders, and that means you're just contributing less. You might have more boss damage, but I think you should be focusing more on using these grenades to provide disruption and damage for your team. And also, that arming time is so ridiculously long too. If crack grenades would be like 50 or like 40% better if they were impact grenades from Tarkov or something, where you just throw them and they immediately blow up. I know that's not how they are in lore, certainly. That's probably one of the main considerations, but they would be so much better if they just detonated as soon as they hit, and if they had a 3rd or 4th charge. Okay, I think they should also, this is my idea for crack grenades, and I promise I'll get on after this. If you could use crack grenades, and if they had 4 charges, and if you could right click and drop them on the ground and they just stayed primed like bouncing betties or like magnetic landmines, and so like when a crusher walks nearby, it goes zip to their armor and then blows up, that would be sick. That would make crack grenades actually really fucking good, but they would still need to have more charges. Okay, then we've got smoke grenades, D tier. Moving on. Oh, wouldn't it be so funny if I just didn't talk about that at all? Okay, so smoke grenades, D tier. First of all, remember, we have to be efficient at this part of the talent tree. Coming this way, you are ignoring getting Survivalist, which is one of the strongest auras in the game, and it's one of the main reasons that why people want to bring veterans to games. So you're not taking Survivalist, which is probably pissing off your team. And smoke grenades are so annoying to everybody involved. They make enemies do unpredictable things because no one plays with smoke grenades, and the enemies don't always behave the same way when they're smoked. They might be indirectly smoked where the smoke is between them and you, or they might be directly smoked where the smoke is on them, and all of those cause the enemy AI to react in different ways. And in order to counteract the enemy threat, the only times you should be dying to enemies is when they do something unpredictable, right? If you can predict every move that the enemy does, if you know the techniques that they will use, if you know all their attack patterns and where they'll approach from and stuff like that, it's really pretty easy to get the mechanical side of the game down personally. But when enemies start doing crazy stuff because like there's something that's smoking off their vision and they're moving around on the flank to get a side view on you, that's when we start to have problems. That plus these things obscure your vision to hit enemies as well, and that's bullshit. And I hate that because, yeah, you oftentimes want to be seeing the enemies. Generally, I would hope that we as players are better shots than the enemy gunners are, and so we should be able to do more damage to them if the smoke wasn't there, and now the smoke is there and you're actually taking away one of our advantages is that we can, you know, shoot them good at range. Okay, yeah, so I mean everyone generally acknowledges that smoke grenades are pretty bad, and also they just don't have any other effects. They obfuscate the area a little bit, but that doesn't stop enemies from meleeing you, it doesn't stop dogs from pouncing you, doesn't stop trappers from trapping you, doesn't disrupt bosses or anything. Yeah, it just makes everything harder and more confusing. Okay, going down here, kill zone. Okay, so this is interesting and new. Sorry, not there. Get back in the fight and catch your breath. So catch your breath saw a rework recently. Let's talk about get back in the fight. This is a real quick one. Stun immunity, slow immunity for 6 seconds, and restore 50% stamina when your toughness is broken. 30-second cooldown. Personally, B tier, I think. You know, this is something you will take if you are a aggressive melee veteran. Oops, excuse me. If you are trying to get into melee, which I think you should be, if you're playing veteran optimally, you should be trying to get into melee and sort of mix it up about half the time. This is something that's valuable because when your toughness is broken, you can very quickly die if you can't move. Like a lot of times when your toughness is broken, you get stun locked, and this prevents you from getting stun locked. This means that like when your toughness gets broken, you can actually react and get out of that position. So it is really nice, and 50% stamina is nothing to shake a stick at, because that can be that's enough stamina to shove, to push enemies away. It's enough stamina to sprint and start sliding, all that stuff. So this is actually a really good, a little bit of like a safety blanket. Then we have Catch Your Breath, which has just recently seen a rework. This used to require you to be 8 meters away from the nearest enemy in order to regenerate 5% toughness per second, but that was fucking impossible, because if you're playing on Havoc difficulty, or really any difficulties these days, there's so many enemies on the map. You have so little time where there's not enemies that close to you, and the replenishment is a good effect, but yeah, that was a problem. Now you have to evade being the target of a melee attack, which basically means you need to be keeping enemies out of your threatened range. Remember, if you've watched my channel previously, or maybe you don't know, I'll explain it to you really quickly. You have this thing called coherency regen that happens when you are near your allies, and that is canceled out by having enemies in these threatened zones around your character. And those are the zones that enemies are trying to stand in order to start engaging you in melee. And there's like 8 of them, and so that's what happens. That's why enemies will circle around you, is once one enemy is in that zone in front of you, the next enemy will go to the next zone, and the next enemy will circle around, and eventually they'll fill up all the spaces around you. This is the same reason why only 1 or maybe even 2 enemies can get to you at a time if you really back yourself into a corner and they look like they're just standing around waiting their turns. It's because you only have that one little slot. So this basically means keep enemies out of those zones, which is way easier than keeping enemies outside of 8 meters. It can be a little bit tricky, but it's definitely better than it used to be. I would say that honestly, I think this is a pretty solid effect. Especially considering Dueling Sword exists. It allows you to move really quickly, and you can shout and get enemies to fuck off and get them out of your zone. So I'm gonna give this an A tier because it's actually feasible to disengage and keep that distance. And when you're at a distance and you're just shooting enemies and they're shooting back at you, replenishing consistent toughness every second for free is very, very nice. Smooth regeneration effects like this in this game in general are very powerful. All right, in the middle here, we have Grenade Tinkerer. Improve your chosen grenade. Crack Grenade gets plus 50% damage, Frag Grenade gets 25% damage and radius, and Smoke Grenade gets 100% duration. So Smoke Grenades get twice as annoying, Frag Grenades get more of both things that make them insane, and Crack Grenades just get more damage so that you can hit the one boss, you're going to kill the whole game with them a little bit harder. This is, okay, so I'm going to do a carve out here. If you are doing Grenadier Veteran, it's A tier. However, if you are doing anything but Grenadier Veteran, it's C tier. Right? So, like, if you're doing your grenade stuff, hell yeah, man. You're probably using frag grenades. 25% damage and radius, that's what you want. That's going to be the vast majority of your damage. If you are not doing that, however, you should be moving on to greener pastures and doing something else. Covering fire. When we kill an enemy with a ranged attack, allies within 5 meters of the target replenish 15% toughness and receive 20% to all base damage for 3 seconds. So this recently got a nice buff, and it's altogether not that bad now. I would say it is probably a B tier talent. This used to give a much lower number, but killing 15% toughness is a good amount of toughness for pretty much any class. And if you're just shooting at enemies that are around your allies in melee, there's no cooldown on this, so you can just bump their toughness back up really, really quickly for them. When they're getting hit, you just shoot the enemies that are around them, and they're going to get their toughness back. And 20% base damage is that's a big number. That's a very big number. So yeah, if you've got an ally who's surrounded by a horde and they're fighting a boss, and you're just shooting the horde off of them, and they just keep hitting the boss, they're going to do a lot more damage, and it's going to make the situation go a lot better. Now, these aren't really optimally placed talents because it's leading into a pretty poor aura that I don't recommend. But it's a fine talent. It's definitely better than it was. Over here, we've got Serrated Blade. 2 stacks of bleed to the target on melee hit. The problem with these over here is that, one, they are underneath Smoke Grenade. So at the very best, you are pathing from Shredder or maybe even Crack all the way over here to get this. At the worst, you've got Smoke Grenade, God bless you, and you are taking Serrated Blade here. I just don't personally find this all that good. Veteran isn't really the sort of class that is doing like slow damage over time buildups. That's sort of the Ogren's thing right now with Batter, where he can apply these stacks of bleed on every melee hit, right? He has a similar talent, but the Ogren gets to multiply those bleeds by use of his stagger and brittleness on his, and just general like buffs to his damage on his talent tree. So this just doesn't really scream Veteran to me. I understand that they're trying to make Veteran have more usability on different types of weapons, but I don't think that this little bit of bleed is much of an effect in general. So I'm going to give this a C tier. And then we've got Agile Engagement. I remember that off the top of my head without even looking at it. Killing an enemy with a melee attack gets 25% range damage, and killing an enemy with a ranged attack gains 25% melee damage. Last 5 seconds. So this encourages you to swap back and forth. I think this is a really well-designed talent. It's in a really poor placement in the tree because, again, it's below Smoke Grenade. But someday, when they remove Smoke Grenade from the game, they put something else useful there. And when there's, they remove Infiltrate and they put something else useful there, and this can go unimpeded and actually have some good talents between it and Weapon Specialist, it's going to be very, very good. Until then, I'm going to rate it at a solid B tier just because it has a poor placement. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. I think it's a really good talent. It really fits into the optimal way you should be playing Veteran, which is getting up into the front line, shouting enemies to the ground, stabbing them with the dueling sword, then swapping the plasma gun, blasting off the trappers and stuff that are coming in, back to the dueling sword, stab, 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 reload your ammo, all that stuff. Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about these auras. Now, Survivalist auras on the left here. Survivalist aura recently saw a nerf. So originally, this ability replenished 1% of ammo for you and allies in coherency whenever any of you kill an elite or specialist enemy, and it had no it can only occur once every whatever seconds thing. So it would just replenish your ammo like a fuck ton. That was in the very, very early stages of the game. That was insane. Then they made it so it replenished 1% of ammo rounded up. We didn't say it, but it rounded up for you and allies in coherency. So this meant that for low ammo total weapons like the Rumbler or the Kickback, Survivalist was in fucking sane, because you had like 30 ammo, and every time you killed an elite, every 5 seconds, you would get 1 ammo. Now you need to kill 3 elites to get that amount of ammo, because there's only 30 ammo. So every time this procs, it gives you 0.3 ammo. So every 3 elite kills, you'll get 1. And this is actually adjusted on like a weapon by weapon basis. I did some testing on it, and it's very, very finicky. But like, you won't get 3, a plasma gun holds 300 ammo or so. You won't get 1% ammo. You won't get 3 ammo every time you get a specialist kill. It's lower than that. It's like 1.67. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. But yeah, it occurs only once every 5 seconds. It's still super fucking good. It's still definitely S tier. It's just recently been nerfed from being like S plus tier. And it's S tier because ammo is important to a lot of classes, and ammo is important to you as the veteran. And if you have this talent, it prints a absurd amount of ammo throughout the course of the game. I did some of this back of the napkin math in the last set of Havoc, where all ammo was reduced by like 66%, or like reduced by like 75% or something like that, right? And you got the effect of like 16 ammo crates out of this over the course of a 40-minute game. That's really, really nuts. And you can tangibly notice the difference when you are playing, even as the veteran, because this single aura makes it so that your less ammo hungry classes, the classes that will only pull out their range weapon to deal with special situations, so like zealots who have flamers or bolters, and it's like, okay, here's a horde, I'll use 1 whole tank of gas on this horde. Or here's a boss, I'm gonna mag dump this boss. It will allow you to regenerate that magazine for free, so that whoever is doing that doesn't need to be going around and picking up the packs of ammo to keep their ammo supplies high, because they can go back to meleeing and doing the normal stuff, and it's contributing just fine. And in the meantime, it's slowly trickling their ammo back up, so they'll have enough to do it again whenever the next situation arises. And therefore, that frees up more ammo for the characters that are actively using it, namely you as the veteran, and probably the Ogren who's spamming Rumbler if you're playing with my very, very overpowered Big Boom Ogren build. So those sort of situations, just having a world's better ammo economy, especially considering Havoc nerfs your ammo to only 40% of normal amounts, is just absolutely invaluable. So S tier, to digress. All right, we got Fire Team here. Fire Team is 5% damage to you and allies in coherency. I'm really tempted to give it a D tier. I'm giving it a D tier, just to piss people off, right? So the only reason you would ever choose Fire Team is if you are trying your absolute damnedest to save points, and you're doing this. You're going like either right here or right here, and you're going straight down the middle. You're going through crack grenades. You're picking up one of these two, and you're going straight down, and yeah, and that's it. Like if you're doing Grenadier Vet and you're doing crack grenades, you might do that. But here's the problem with Fire Team. 5% fucking damage sucks ass. This isn't even 5% base damage. It's 5% damage. Okay, the Ogren has like a single his Keystone, right? It gives him up to 24% damage. He pretty much gets this much damage from 2 stacks out of 8 stacks that he gets for just meleeing enemies. 5% damage is nothing, and remember, this isn't base damage, so it's not multiplicative with everything else, it's just additive. So if you have any other damage buffs, which other stuff has like tons and tons of, this is fucking nothing. And I get comments, like the last time I made this video, I guarantee I'm gonna get the comment again, because someone just paused the video as soon as they saw me rate Fire Team a D tier, and they're typing their comment down below. But I want you to know, if you just left this comment, you're stupid. 5% damage is not 20% damage because there's 4 people on the team, right? That's 5% increased kill rate for everyone on the team together. Everyone on the team was already doing like 100 DPS, let's say, and now we're going to multiply that by 1.05. So now the whole team cumulatively is doing 105 DPS. The enemies are only going to die 5% faster, and that would be assuming the most favorable situation where this is the only damage buff you have in your whole team. The more damage buffs, general damage buffs, like increased melee damage, increased just general increased damage, the more buffs you have. If you have a zealot with the chorus ability that adds 30% damage for 10 seconds, this does even less because it's only a small fraction, and so it's giving you an even less percentage boost to your damage. So this doesn't even lower your kill times by 5%. It lowers it by like 2 or 3%. So really just a poor excuse for a aura, and it's also so boring to me as a concept. I have always hated it as an aura because I feel like it's such a cop-out in terms of like, oh, we could be making interesting auras that are cool and thought-provoking to have on the team, like Survivalist, and then we got this one. It's such a piece of shit. Okay, moving on to Close and Kill. I am rating Close and Kill as an A tier aura. 5% movement speed is a lot of movement speed in this game. Movement speed is one of the most broken stats that you can have in Darktide, because if you move faster than the enemies no longer pose a threat. I think the Zealot is a perfect example of that. If you are playing the Zealot and there is a veteran on your team who has this, you can feel it. You are fucking flying around, and that 5% movement speed is very, very juicy. It is an A tier aura. However, it's in a really bad position. Like I said before, if at some day in the future Smoke Grenade goes away or Shredder moves to here, and then we have good Blitz and then Agile Engagement and then Close and Kill, this route will actually be really fucking good for melee veterans, or generally like melee / skirmisher focused veterans. So I like the aura, I just hate its placement. And let's do this last row and then we'll take a little intermission. What do you say? We've got over here on the left Kill Zone and Opening Salvo. Kill Zone just recently got a rework as well. So this used to only give you damage when you were out of a certain distance of enemies or something like that, right? Or it was when you haven't been damaged in like a certain amount of time or something like that, right? Well, whatever it was, now it's 15% range base damage when you've avoided melee attacks for 8 seconds. So this is really, really good. I think this is an S tier. Come fight me about it. The reason because this is going to multiply all your range damage by 1.15 because it is a multiplicative factor since it's base damage, and it only requires you to have avoided melee attacks, not the same qualifier as Catch a Breath is, where you haven't been the target of a melee attack. It's avoiding melee attacks. So if you're dodging appropriately, enemies can take swings at you. As long as you don't get hit, you are keeping this buff, and it's a good buff. It's a very, very good buff because you will almost always have this to engage the situation, to be standing back and start blasting stuff with the plasma rifle or whatever, and it's just so good. Range or base damage in general is a very, very powerful thing in this game, and this is one of the only nodes in the whole tree that considerably buffs veterans' ranged killing abilities, outside of like Executioner's Stance specific stuff and this Keystone down here that's garbage. So yeah, this is really nice. Opening Salvo, the first 20% ammo after reload has a 10% range, or plus 10% range critical hit chance. This is kind of a meme. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a B tier for being a bit of a meme here. B tier for a bit of a meme. This can put you into some absurd critical ranges with things like the Las Pistol, where you can have upwards of 100% crit, I think, or pretty close to it anyway, and consume almost no ammo. It's just such a weird qualifier for it, that first 20% is a very, very odd thing indeed. And I just generally don't think that you need to spend that node for an extra 10% crit. A lot of weapons that have, already have means of generating 10% crit, right? Like your recon las guns of the world and stuff like that. And we have a ton of other crit generation in the tree. 10% extra, yes, it's fine. But if you think about it from the perspective of Shock Trooper, which takes no ammo, so for 20% of your mag, you're going to be taking 10% less ammo. So because you're going to crit 10% more, right? So that's like a 2%. I think I'm doing that math right. I think it's like a 2% ammo increase. I just don't think it's worth it unless you're pulling some memes off or trying to pull some memes off anyway. Then in the middle here, we got Field Improvisation. Ammo crates restore grenades. Metapacks heal 100% faster, cleanse corruption, and replenish 1% toughness per second. So this is... If you are playing in non-Havoc difficulties, this is good. This is an A tier if you're playing in non-Havoc. Or you're playing a grenade build, probably, because of the grenade thing. It's a C tier if you're playing in Havoc. So in Havoc, the only things that this would be valuable for is cleansing that corruption. Because the grenades restored are also scaled down by the ammo penalties that exist in Havoc, and there's nothing else to it, right? So you'd really just want it for that cleansing corruption. You wouldn't get almost any grenades out of it at all. What would make this so much better is if this improved the amount of ammo that you got from it. If it was sort of those same buffs you see in Payday 2 to like medibags and stuff like that, where they have more charges. Like, what if it just gave you one more charge? If there's 5 charges in it instead of 4, I think that would be much more usable in terms of general gameplay. But I can understand that would be kind of hard to balance around. The other thing about it is that, the corruption cleansing effects, that's not that useful into current Havoc, I don't think. I think that's a lot less valuable than it was last season. But also, like, most times when you're corrupted, you're going past the bars anyway, and you can't cleanse back past that. And this is also one of just 3 nodes. You got 3 options to get down to voice of command here, which is the route you're going, and one of them is really absurdly good, and you wouldn't not take that, so you'd be doubling up at a minimum to take either one of these 2. You're definitely taking Demolition Stockpile. Let's go ahead and award Demolition Stockpile its S tier and just get it over with, right? Demolition Stockpile is an absolute S tier ability. If any other class in the game could print 1 grenade per second, well, I mean, I guess this would work pretty well for like a Zealot who could generate stun grenades or flame grenades or something. That would be pretty good, but Zealots aren't using those because the Zealot talent tree is fucking broken. But if Ogans could generate 1 grenade per minute, the game would be fucking bonkers. They can generate rocks, but no cluster bombs or no big booms. Yeah, so this is S tier, and the only thing you got to be wary of is keeping it cooking so that you don't ever cap out on grenades. But absolutely awesome to be able to print, over a 30-minute game, that's 30 grenades, right? That's the equivalent of finding 10 packs of grenades if you're using shredders. It's the equivalent of finding 15 packs of grenades if you're using crack grenades. And, this is only going to be beaten out in terms of capacity by Demolition Team later on, but it's a great thing, and you can have both, which is nuts. And then we get Twin Blast. I just don't like Twin Blast personally. I'm rating it C tier. I think Twin Blast is a meme thing. Here's my logic on this. It is a 20% chance to throw an additional grenade. Let's assume in a good game of Havoc, a solid game, or let's assume a solid like Orc Damnation. That's probably where like a lot of people are at, or somewhere near there. 50 grenades, right? That means, you've regenerated an extra 30 from Demolition Stockpile, you regenerated an extra 20 from Demolition Team procs, and then your base ones. So you get 50 grenades, and on 10 of those throws, you will throw 2 grenades instead of 1. So, it does throw them at a little bit of an angle. So your grenades, if you're throwing shredders, you'll throw 2 and they'll be spread out and it'll hit the horde. If you're throwing at a boss, or if you're throwing at like a pack of metal enemies, one crack grenade. You throw crack grenades at one, will latch onto one enemy, and the other one will seek out another one. They won't like both hit the same target and waste themselves. So that's good. But the thing is you do not get to choose when this triggers. So if you've got a situation like I'm being surrounded by enemies here, you know, I'm getting wedged into a corner and I need to drop a grenade to get out. And you drop it, and that's when it chooses to trigger your twin blast, and you throw 2 grenades instead of 1. Well, great, you did a little bit more damage, but could you have been better served by choosing something else? Absolutely. There are so many valuable talents down here. I can't stress this enough, that spending anything extra up here is a huge fucking waste, if it's not like something actually good like Killzone. So yeah, Twin Blast just doesn't offer you enough promise because you can't depend on it. Now, if what Twin Blast was is every 2 minutes, the next grenade you throw will throw 2 grenades, now we're fucking talking, right? Now we can plan on that situation, and we can say, the next time I throw a grenade, it's going to throw 2. Let me find a situation that's worthy of these 2 grenades. Or, you know, or you're gonna end up in a situation where you got a bunch of poxwalkers around you, and you throw 2 grenades, and you're like, oh, fucking great, 2 shred grenades to the enemies that would have died with just 1. Okay, like, it's just not worth the point, and it's such a low percentage chance. It's like a depressingly low percentage chance. It's like they thought this would be super overpowered if you could throw like 33% of the time or something. Like, I just don't believe that 10 extra grenades is all that powerful. So gotta give it the C tier. I think it's more of a meme than anything to be like, aha, I quadruple fragged the boss and it looked really cool to watch his health bar evaporate. Okay, then we got Grenadier over here. You can carry 1 extra grenade. So just like I did for this talent up here, if you are playing Grenadier Veteran, this is an A tier ability. If you are not, this is a C tier ability. Because it's out of the way for anybody else, right? If you're playing Grenadier Veteran, having extra deep pockets for throwing grenades is very valuable. Because, you know, it's going to allow you to, on those off chances where Demolition Team goes crazy and prints you 3 grenades in 1 pack, that'll allow you to absorb those extra grenades and keep your Demolition stockpile ticking. But if you're not playing grenade-focused Veteran, then I have to say that it's not worth it to carry 1 extra grenade. You already got plenty. 3 is a good number for grenades. Leave no one behind, 20% assist speed and revive speed, 20% movement speed and stun immunity when moving towards a knockdown or incapacitated ally. Whenever you revive a knockdown ally, they receive 33% damage reduction for 5 seconds. D tier. If you have listened to or watched my videos for any amount of time, you know that I hate these. Oh, this situation is going tits up. Here's a talent that's very, very situational that will activate only in this tits up situation and offers you middling benefits. Those sort of talents are the absolute worst in this game, and there's at least like 1 on every class, and they're always just dog shit. So, like, let's assess the situation, right? So your ally gets knocked down. You move towards your ally. You're moving like a little bit faster, 20% faster, so that's good. But like oftentimes, you know, you're not moving directly towards them, and oftentimes you're pretty close to them, so who cares about moving fast anyway? Assist speed and revive speed, like you can help them up faster, but you can just take that carry on your talent, and when you revive them, they gain 33% damage reduction for 5 seconds. All of this is assuming that like your ally actually gets knocked down. What I would love is, I think the Ogryn's version of this is way better, right? The Ogryn gets damage reduction when he has allies that are knocked down around him, that allows him to like weather the situation. This talent kind of like implicitly assumes that like your ally is wide open to be picked up. You just need to get there fast, right? And then you can weather the interaction together. But the problem generally is that the ally who gets downed is in a really bad situation, and you need to be able to like fight your way through it or get them clear. And you know, this doesn't need to exist because Shout exists. Shout is the solution to this. It staggers every enemy within 9 meters. So, and you just walk up to your ally and you shout, and then you start to pick them up. And guess what? When you fully pick them up, who cares if they have 33% damage reduction for 5 seconds? Because if you shout when you go to pick your ally up, they're going to be gold toughness when you pick them up. So they are already going to be immune to damage, pretty much. And you don't have to worry about picking them up super fast because you've got Shout, and that clears enemies for long enough for you to do it. I can't really... And also, this is in a terrible, awful location on the tree. This is maybe one of the worst locations you could have on the tree. So D tier, for sure. All right, guys. Let's take a little break from my voice here, and we'll pick it up in a few minutes. Enjoy the break. All right, let us continue with part 2 of this veteran talent tier list. Up first, we got to talk about the abilities, and I'm just going to go ahead and knock this out. We've got one S tier ability here. It's the Veteran's Shout. If I could actually grab the thing properly. The Veteran's Shout is probably the most overpowered ability in the game. It's just on such a obscenely short cooldown, and it's really not the shout itself, but in fact this node right here, Duty and Honor, that gives it its power. So Voice of Command by base effect replenishes all your toughness and staggers all enemies within 9 meters, and that's a full stagger. So that'll push back bosses, it'll knock crushers to the ground, it'll release enemies that are grabbed by chaos spawns, all that stuff. And then Duty and Honor gives all of your allies and yourself plus 50 toughness for 15 seconds. This can exceed your maximum toughness, and it is gold toughness, which is absurd. And that gold toughness is a buff that lasts for the 15-second duration. So if, for instance, you cast this or you shout, and then the next millisecond a burster jumps on top of you and explodes you, and it knocks all of your toughness off. It won't hurt your HP because you had gold toughness, and that's what gold toughness means, is you cannot take damage to your HP. But if you have some way to, in the next second, regenerate all of your toughness again, you will go right back to being in gold toughness. And so you can continue dipping back into gold toughness for 15 seconds. And that's probably the most powerful thing about Duty and Honor, is that that gold toughness buff lasts for 15 seconds. You just give it to your allies, and then it's on them. They can use their own toughness regeneration capabilities to keep that gold toughness maxed out. And this means that playing normal games just becomes a cakewalk, because it takes like 4 hits to take any damage through a gold toughness on heresy difficulty and below. And if you're an Ogren or someone who can regenerate your toughness very quickly, like a taunt Ogren, you literally can't die as long as you're golded up. And this is such a short cooldown. It's a 30-second cooldown. And then we got Only in Death does Duty End. Voice of Command revives knockdown allies within radius, but also reduces that radius by 33% and increases your ability cooldown by 50%. D tier. Do not pick this talent. I see so many people picking this because they're like, oh, reviving an ally. You know what else can revive an ally? Run up to the ally and shout, and then just pick them up while everything else is stunned. Easy peasy. Easiest revive of your life, pretty much. And you don't have to have a 45-second cooldown instead of a 30-second cooldown. Why would you do that? And it lowers the radius of your shout, which is crazy. Why would you do these things that are the powerful things about the shout? Or its radius is really big and the cooldown is super short, and you're going to nerf both of those in order to pick up allies that shouldn't have been knocked down in the first place. You know, if you had shouted 15 seconds ago, your ally probably wouldn't have gone down, but you couldn't shout because you took this talent. So do not take this talent. Okay, let's come back over here to Executioner Stance. Executioner Stance. Enter range stance for 5 seconds. When in range stance, you instantly equip your range weapon, and you deal 25% range damage, plus 25% range weak spot damage, and your spread and recoil are greatly reduced. Human-sized elite enemies and specialist enemies are highlighted for 5 seconds. Killing a highlighted enemy refreshes the duration of its bonuses for 5 seconds, and this is a cooldown of 30 seconds. Now, this has gotten buffed several times over the years, and it is still not even approaching anywhere near as good as Shout is. They lowered the cooldown from, like, I think it was a minute at first, and then it went to 45 seconds, and now it's 30 seconds. The real thing about this is 25% range damage and 25% range weak spot damage isn't really that much to write home about, and that's all this offers. Because if we look at its ability modifiers here, we have just a couple of different things that allow this to outline different sorts of enemies. So enhanced target priority now outlines elite and specialist enemies for allies, for all allies in your coherency for 5 seconds. Counterfire outlines all human-sized range enemies, so the normal gunners, and this is probably usually the one you want to take. The bigger they are, outlines all Ogryn enemies. So if I had to rank this talent, which I guess I do because I'm doing the fucking video on ranking these talents, I would rank Executioner Stance itself a C. I would rank this talent here for killing normal enemies a B, and I would rank the Ogryn one a D, and I would rank this highlighting it for your allies also a C. And so here is my reasoning on this. First of all, Executioner Stance is not a very usable option in today's meta of gameplay. You can already see enemies, so you really don't need them highlighted. They're not exactly like camouflaging in. And the bonuses that we get for this are only 25% range damage and 25% ranged weak spot damage and some spread and recoil reduction. On many weapons, especially weapons that are very in the meta, like the Recon Las gun and the Plasma gun, those stats don't really matter at all. And that's not really what we need to focus on. And then you have to consider that these augment abilities, and I'm doing air quotes here, augments, do not actually augment this ability at all. They just make it highlight more targets. And if you noticed here, this doesn't actually only apply that bonus damage to the highlighted targets. You can shoot anybody you want and you have that extra damage. So highlighting extra targets just gives you more targets to reset on, but it also clutters your screen. So if you choose Counterfire, which I think is the best of these because it gives you the most targets to reset on, every fucking enemy on the map is going to be highlighted basically. So it's kind of hard to like pick out the ones that are really high value. If you pick the bigger they are, you're wasting a point to highlight Ogryn enemies. Could you not see Ogryn enemies before? You need them to be highlighted? And can we really not get a reset on anything else? Like, how often are you really getting a reset on an Ogryn? Like, there's not that many of them, and they're really fucking obvious. So this should not be picked. And Enhanced Target Priority is getting a C tier rating for me because while it is useful to your team, it generally plays as a detriment to you. It is actually a counter synergy or an anti-synergy because what it's going to do is it's going to outline all elites and specialist enemies for all your allies. And remember that you get extra benefits from sniping those targets, right? You get a reset on your ability if you snipe any elite or specialist, which is one of your highlighted targets, which is so you want to be doing that. You don't want your allies picking those up, and especially when we're talking about tactical awareness, a ability we'll talk, or one of the talents we'll talk about in a few minutes here. It's very, very important for veterans to be on their toes in terms of sniping specials for their ultimate cooldown. They're one of the best specialist pickers in the game. So we should be focusing on that and taking our allies' attention, letting them focus on other stuff rather than them distracting them with targets that we should easily be able to handle. And then they're going to steal them from us and make our cooldown longer. Okay, so that's what we've got, as you can see right there, B, C, B, and D. Oh, nice, I'll have C, D. All right, let's go over here and talk about Infiltrate. Infiltrate is a D tier ability. Infiltrate is just really, really a misplaced ability on the veteran. It does not play at all in the same way as something like Shroudfield does on the Zealot. I get a lot of people saying, oh, well, Shroudfield is like OP, like S tier plus. Why is Infiltrate not the same? Well, there's two functional things at play. Well, actually, there's three functional things at play here. One is that Infiltrate, when you use it, does not give you any benefits when you come out of it just by itself. When you use something like Shroudfield, when you stealth, enemies can't attack you during it, obviously. And then when you emerge from stealth, you get a free, big, solid crit that does a ton of damage, and that synergizes super well with the Zealot's kit. And then he has a regeneration after the fact. So there's something that keeps you safe in the time where you're very, very vulnerable with invisibility builds, which is when you're not invisible, right? The problem with Infiltrate is that it reads, if we could just go to the tab board here, replenish all toughness and enter stealth for 8 seconds, gaining 25% movement speed. Leaving stealth suppresses nearby enemies, attacking you makes you leave stealth. Okay, so what's going to happen is maybe you're getting shot at or something, you press the button and you enter into stealth and you get all your toughness back, but that doesn't mean that anything is going to protect you once you come out of of stealth. And coming out of stealth is a big investment for this ability because you are playing as veteran. You are not zealot. Zealot has the advantage with infiltrate of it being a 30-second cooldown with a 5-second duration. He also has multiple abilities in his tree that can cut his cooldown by like a huge amount. I mean, maybe if you watch some of my builds, maybe my most popular builds with the Rat King build, you can literally infinite chain stealth on Zealot if you're getting backstabs efficiently. And you cannot do that in Infiltrate because the only way you can sufficiently lower your cooldown or drastically lower your cooldown as Veteran is to snipe specials. And at base, Infiltrate has a 45-second cooldown. So what's going to happen is you're going to activate your stealth, and by the time the stealth wears off 8 seconds later, you'll have 37 seconds left to go. So unless you manage to kill 6 specials really quickly, you are going to have a lot of time to wait for Infiltrate to come back up. And during that period in between is when you are vulnerable to dying. Now, you could answer that with Overwatch, which is your combat ability gains +1 charge but plus 33% cooldown. However, this is also a D tier ability, and let me explain to you why. First off, this is a, sorry, I should show you that. That's the recording of the video. It's gonna go up later. So what this does is it makes your cooldown 1 minute instead of 45 seconds. So if you want to pull off this thing where you stealth in behind enemy lines, you get a couple kills, and then you re-stealth and get away and get back to your team or something, you can only pull that off once every approximately 2 minutes without any other cooldown producing things going on, which is insane for something that the Zealot can do every maybe 10 seconds. He can pop out of stealth, kill an enemy with a backstab, kill a second enemy, re-enter stealth, all within a 5-second span. And this makes your cooldown 15 seconds longer than it already was with this super long cooldown. And my favorite part about this is it gives you +1 charge, but you do not start the game with 2 charges. You start the game with 1 charge. So you'll get the first combat encounter and you probably won't even have that second charge yet. You'll only still have 1 use of your ability. Now, in a game mode like well, actually not even Mortis Trials, but like if we had some sort of thing that could really drastically reduce your cooldown and you could stockpile these charges, if you got infinite yellow stims on you or something, that could be okay. But it's really bad, and it's only going to allow you to make plays with Infiltrate every once in a great while. Then we've got Surprise Attack, which is probably the only okay thing. Actually, I'm going to say both Surprise Attack and whatever this one is. What's this called? Hunter's Resolve. Both of these I would say are B tier. Surprise Attack gives you 30% damage for 5 seconds when you leave stealth. This is kind of the idea of the ability, which is you stealth behind the enemies or in a direction they're not looking. You come out of stealth and you start blasting, right? You appear off to their side and they're like, oh shit, and then you just unleash on them with whatever you got. The problem with that being is you will get annihilated very quickly, because the thing that's supposed to keep you safe about Infiltrate is that when you come out of stealth, it suppresses nearby enemies. But remember that only ranged enemies can be suppressed. So you will come out of stealth and ranged enemies around you will be suppressed, sure, but the crushers and stuff that are nearby are immediately going to turn around and route to attack you. And then you will just have to stand on your own 2 feet, and you're isolated from your team, so there's no coherency regen, there's nothing for them to save you because you went in deep with the Infiltrate, and then you have no way to re-engage into stealth unless you have a second charge from Overwatch. So you just have to fight for your damn life for a certain amount of time. Now, you could take Hunter's Resolve, which is going to give you toughness damage reduction for 10 seconds on leaving stealth. But let me show you something. Let me just let's just compare this to oh, sorry, it was at the top of the screen there, to Zealot's equivalent ability, which is Shroudfield. Okay, so when you enter Shroudfield, you get the movement speed, right? You get the movement speed 20% versus 25%, which Infiltrate gets, and then you get all of this critical damage and finesse damage and stuff when you come out. So you get a huge damage boost on your first attack when you come out for just the base point, without even taking this additional point that exists right here of this node for an extra 30%. You get extra damage in your build. So the ability itself gives you extra damage. This ability gives you no extra damage. Then we have down here Invigorating Revelation, which is the really slept on part of Shroudfield. It gives you your toughness back after you leave stealth and gives you damage reduction for 5 seconds. And wouldn't you know that that's the time where you actually really need that toughness damage reduction, where you actually really need replenishment. And that's one of the things that the veteran is very, very weak at, is replenishing toughness on the fly. In order for the veteran to replenish toughness, he generally has to claim kills, and his really, really big methods of replenishing toughness is just shout, right? The other way you could do it is by activating Infiltrate again. But remember, unless you have this right here, you don't have another charge, and if you do have that, then you're waiting a whole full minute to get another charge. So a really, really frustratingly designed ability, and I don't think it belongs on this class at all. And if I had anything worse to say about it, I couldn't come up with anything worse than talking about low profile here. Low profile Infiltrate Veteran might be the most grief build you could possibly play in the game. So if you're trying to make some sort of montage where you're just like, you know, Bub Games style trolling your allies in Darktide, choose this, because what this does is, you know, you run into the enemies, you activate Infiltrate, and they all fuck off and they go and attack your team, and then you can run even deeper into the enemies and pop out behind them and start shooting them and be like, I'm helping. But with this, they're not even going to try to attack you. You're going to be shooting all these enemies in the back, and they're all going to be running towards your team. And so, like, yeah, you might claim a couple of kills, but like, your team is going to get overwhelmed by a bunch of bullshit in the meantime. And like, people, defenders of Infiltrate will say, and I know they'll say that because I've already seen them leave it in the comments for my last video where I summarized this video, they'll say like, you know, you can make some serious plays, you can rescue your allies with Infiltrate. Well, guess what you can do with Voice of Command? You can rescue your allies with this, but also, more importantly, you can keep your allies from ever being in a situation where they would need you to rescue them in the first place. Because if you're shouting near them and you're knocking enemies down and you're playing with the team, you are preventing a situation where you need to use a stealth ability to, you know, clutch. The Shroud Field is great at clutching and all, but the best way it should be played is just like right near your team, where you can get lots and lots of backstabs and clean up like priority targets. That's where Shroud Field is really powerful and important. And if it turns to a situation where you need to clutch, obviously you have it. But Infiltrate is going to shoot yourself in the foot. You're not going to be able to support your team in any significant way. You are only there as a backup. You know, in case things go really, really bad and everyone else is dead, you can stealth away and whoop-de-doo. So yeah, I just really, really do not like Infiltrate. I really hope that this ability gets fully gutted and reworked when they look at Veteran as a class. All right, let's get down here and talk about this next row over here on the bottom left. So we have, in order of appearance, Precision Strikes, Determined, and Deadshot. Okay, Precision Strikes is an easy S tier for us here. Precision Strikes is 30% weak spot damage. Note that this does not apply to just one type of damage. It's not just melee damage, not just range damage. So when you're using the dueling sword, a weapon that already has a huge weak spot multiplier, this is adding on top of that, which makes veteran dueling sword users like some of the best. You get massive power out of using this, and so if you can aim at all, this is a huge boon. Compare that to Determined, which is suppression immunity. I just don't think suppression immunity is worth very much. There's very few weapons that even respond to suppression at all. You know, notably, like some of the auto-firing weapons, you can be suppressed, but it only takes a moment to be unsuppressed. And most notably, the very powerful plasma gun is pretty much suppression immune. I don't think I've ever noticed being suppressed when I'm using the plasma gun. It just maintains its ammo. It maintains its sort of lock on a center screen there. So I just don't think suppression immunity is worth it at all, especially considering, as I've said before, your goal with Veteran as in general is to get to S tier perks. There are so many S tier perks in his tree that you really don't want to be wasting any time. And I'm going to tell you right now that there's some S tier ones down here and there's some S tier ones down here. So we don't want to be wasting points picking up 2 in this row. You should pick up this headshot one and move on. Now I will give some special mention to Deadshot. I think Deadshot is probably worthy of an A tier / B tier. A tier just because it is it's viable in some builds. Like I could see this being actually pretty good. It did recently get a buff where they lowered the stamina that it takes per shot, which I think is very nice and lends it some viability. But this is not usable on some weapons, right? Like you wouldn't take this on, well, First of all, you wouldn't take it on Plasma Gun because it literally cannot activate on Plasma Gun. But, bracing your weapon like that with that extra critical chance makes the difference for las weapons because of Shock Trooper here, we'll get to in a second. But that's a lot of extra ammo efficiency. That's 25% more ammo when you're using this. And critical hits do have additional effects on things like Recon las guns and las pistols. So for las builds, this is actually not bad at all, especially for las pistol builds. So I'll give it an A tier, but only pick it if you have a build that synergizes really, really strongly with crits and you're focusing on doing something like that. And then you'll also want to take a bunch of stamina curios as well with it. Let's come over, let's just do this whole row. In fact, fully loaded 25% ammo. I mean, what are we gonna say? We have to take it, first of all, to get down here, but 25% ammo is just such a huge boon on a class that already has a big ammo capacity. And this is also going to synergize very, very nicely with our ability to regenerate percentage ammo, because if we increase our overall maximum ammo capacity, our percentage ammo replenishment goes up, right? So yeah, 25% ammo, no brainer. I mean, obviously no brainer, you have to take it, but yeah, S tier blessing for sure. And speaking of S tier, S for Shock Trooper. Shock Trooper is one of those blessings in the game that makes you scratch your head at how broken it is and be like, why does like Ogren's Point Blank Barrage not offer like similar features, right? Shock Trooper gives critical hits with las weapons, no ammo consumption. So things like Recon las gun, which normally melt through ammo, can just crit for free, especially considering Recon las gun has Headhunter, which is a blessing that raises your crit every time you land a headshot. So if you fire at a boss, you will be able to fire like 70% more rounds because you can land consistent headshots and just get crits like 70% of the time. That stacked up with reciprocity and some other critical things like Deadshot in the tree, especially for las pistols, you can near border on 100% crit. Even in some cases, you can go over 100% crit with opening salvo. So that means you can just shoot critical free shots all day, every day. And opening salvo and Shock Trooper have a synergy together because if it consumes no ammo, then we're staying in that first 20% of the magazine, so we're keeping that 10% range critical hit chance, so we're critical hitting more and consuming less ammo. So very, very strong with las weapons. It makes them have basically unlimited ammo. You will have the best ammo efficiency on the team, hands down. Superiority Complex is another S tier perk. 15% base damage to elite enemies. Elite enemies are by far the most numerous enemies on higher difficulties, so this is one of those blessings that only gets better the higher difficulty you're tackling, and 15% base damage means it's a 1.15 times multiplier to every bit of damage that you're doing, whether that's bleeds, burns, any sort of dots, direct damage, melee damage, whatever it is. And this stacks with Kill Zone, 15% base range damage when you avoided melee attacks for 8 seconds. So when you're entering into an engagement and nothing has been melee attacking you because you're changing between zones, you're going into a new room, you whip out your plasma gun and you fire it at a gunner. Well, that gunner is a elite for 15% base damage here, and you haven't taken a damage or a melee attack in the last 8 seconds, so that gunner is going to get hit for 1.3 times damage, which is huge. And if you hit him in the head, you're getting another 30% multiplier. So you just become this absolute one-shot king. This is and also this applies to again all sorts of damage. So this just makes you generally a better fighter against the scary enemies in the game, and we love that in perks. Then we've got a very curious thing here with Marksman. What I'll say about Marksman is that Marksman on paper is a very good blessing. It's just a talent, but it's just unfortunate that it exists on a class that has so many other talents to choose from. I would totally take this on Zealot or something like that because this is super strong. What this does is, where am I trying to go here? What this does is, on ability use gain for 10 seconds, any weak spot hits gain 20% strength. When you use Infiltrate, which you should not be doing, this is applied after leaving stealth. Okay, so this does not sound as powerful as it is, but this is a special type of power that only this ability has in the entire game. So what this means is weak spot hit strength. And actually, no, there's one other thing that has it now, and it's in the Ogren talent tree. The Ogren has this thing that says weak spot melee strength or something like that. So weak spot hit strength is not available on any weapons. It's not anywhere else in the talent trees. So what this ultimately ends up being is a 1.2 times multiplier on all weak spot damage. So if you, for instance, enter into that room. You've walked between rooms, so you haven't been attacked by melee enemies in 8 seconds. You're shooting at an elite target like a gunner, and you hit them in the head. You're going to multiply your damage by 1.3 for this. You're going to multiply that weak spot damage by 1.3 for precision strikes, and then you're going to multiply that. If you shouted or used executioner stance first, then you will multiply that damage by 1.2. So that's a ton of multipliers, and this is such a solid blessing because we are already really good at headshots, and it can be used at any range, and it's 10 seconds. So if you're using this with shout, and you like shout the enemies and they fall down on the ground, and you come up and stab them in the head, it's very, very powerful. The problem is you don't have that many points to spend on this. You've already spent 4 points here in all likelihood to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And spending a 5th one here is a little bit much, right? We have some things to buy over here. Don't sleep on these other 2 trees because they got some even better stuff. So my dream for the veteran tree is that when Executioner's Strike or Executioner's Stance gets reworked and sharpshooting becomes a viable, like, contributor to damage again, that headshot focused builds will be in the meta again, that like sniping and getting headshots will be equally as potent as just shouting and staying defensive and doing middling damage. So I think at that point, this sort of blessing or this sort of talent will be very, very, very strong. But for right now, I can't really endorse you picking it up, although in strength alone, it is A tier. All right, let's go over here and talk about this middle row. We got Born Leader for the Emperor and keep their heads down. Okay, so Born Leader is allies in coherency replenish 15% of any toughness that you replenish. I will go ahead and say that this is just an A tier. It's a solid passive thing you don't have to think about. We are a burst toughness replenisher as veteran. We don't smoothly replenish very much toughness at all, but when we shout, allies in coherency, they get 50 toughness because we're in the radius of our shout, right? But any toughness that we replenish, they're going to get an extra 15%. And remember, at the top of the tree, like with this right here, out for blood or what it's called, that talent allows us to get 10% on every kill, on every melee kill. So then, therefore, our allies are going to get 1.5% when we get a melee kill. It's just nice. It's a little bit of extra toughness for our allies. And the reason it is also A tier is because we have to move through here, and I think it's just generally better than these other 2 options. For the Emperor, gives you your combat ability gives you and allies in coherency 10% melee base damage and 10% range base damage for 5 seconds. I think this is just a very piddly amount of, I know it's melee base damage and range base damage, so like it's kind of a high value stat, but it's such a small amount and such a small duration. If you've watched my content before, you know I really detest these abilities that have durations, or these talents that have durations that are like sub 8 seconds. It's so hard to get any value out of them at all. So like think about, when you use your shout or something, how many enemies do you really attack in the next 5 seconds after that happens, right? Especially if you're shouting and like doing an objective or shouting and rezzing an ally, you don't make benefit out of this at all. So let's assume, like, just to be generous to this ability, that every time you shout, you are going fully ham and like damaging enemies as much as you can. And if you did that, right, if you shouted on cooldown, 1/6 of the time you would have this buff, right? 5 seconds every 30 seconds, and you can get it faster. Let's even assume that you can do it once every 15 seconds. You can shout once every 15 seconds. Then you are only going to get, in general, a 3% damage increase across the whole game, which I think is just definitely worse than having a little bit of extra defenses for the whole team. So I'm going to give this just a B tier. I think it's whatever. However, we're going to give C tier. A, B, C. It's easy as range suppression sucks. Keep their heads down is 50% ranged attack suppression. I do not like suppression. I will go on record right now and say I just firmly am against suppression in this game. I think it's a wonky mechanic. I don't think it has any place in this game. I think it makes people not understand what is going on in an engagement, right? Why can I not hit the targets? Oh, I'm suppressed. How am I supposed to tell that I'm suppressed? Why does getting shot directly not suppress me, but bullets narrowly missing me does suppress me? And the same thing applies to the enemies. It just complicates things needlessly. And when I'm shooting with veteran, I couldn't ask for an easier target than the enemies in this game, right? They run in predictable patterns. They stand still to shoot you, barring the new gunners that kind of strafe slowly, but they're standing upright. When you have a high level of suppression value and you shoot near enemies, what do though? They duck and cover, they'll roll on the floor, they'll cower, they'll put their heads down, they'll move their hitbox, and it means you're going to miss attacks. It means they're going to move in predictable ways. Like, I want my enemies walking towards me in a big, flat, straight line with all their heads dead level with where my gun barrel is pointed, right? I don't want them dip ducking and hemming hawing and spreading out all over the place. So I just do not like ranged attack suppression. I think it just messes with the flow of the game with how predictably you can funnel enemies. And remember, it only works on ranged enemies too, which is another big reason to avoid it. Okay, tactical awareness. Absolute S tier. Maybe the fundamental thing that makes like Veteran in general work, especially makes Shout Veteran work. Tactical awareness gives you 6 seconds of ability cooldown every time you kill a specialist enemy, which should be pretty damn often because we are Veteran. We are equipped with the best abilities to, snipe off specials with direct damage. So like plasma gun and recon last gun, those are all amazing direct damage range weapons at picking specials and all that stuff. And this is just such a solid free cooldown. Whenever I'm playing Veteran, I have to like shout at my team like, okay, if the mutant or the dog comes at us and misses, I am going to go and stab it and kill it. Don't worry about it. You guys don't have to come over and clean it up. I got this. Because you're just stealing 6 seconds from your shout cooldown, basically, every time that they kill a dog or kill a mutant that's completely vulnerable instead of letting you have it. And if you can get that, you can stack Shout all day, right? That's one of the extra S tier things about Shout is if you Shout with this and you have like the dog pack Maelstrom modifier where there's just 20 dogs that attack you in a 10-second period, you will get like 4 or 5 cooldowns of this ability, and then you'll look down at your health bar and you'll have 250 gold toughness on the bar. So yeah, tactical awareness is insane, especially for voice of command, which is really like where it shines. It just makes veterans so strong to have on the team. Then we've also got Iron Will. I mean, you guys are seeing why I said there's so much S tier stuff going on in here. Iron Will is how the veteran survives. A class like the Zealot, he has a ton of toughness damage reduction built into his kit based on when he crits, and he regenerates a lot from using his abilities and stuff like that. The Veteran really has like one main method of regenerating toughness, and that is shouting. He can also regenerate toughness by killing, but a lot of times you're not able to secure a kill, right? That's the really sketchy situations, and it's what makes classes very strong is when they can sustain their toughness without securing kills. In order for the Veteran to sustain his toughness, he needs to have Iron Will active, and Iron Will gives you 50% reduced toughness damage if you were above 75% toughness. And guess what's above 75% toughness? You guessed it, being in gold toughness. So when we shout and gain 50 gold toughness on top of our existing toughness, what this effectively means if we have just gained 100 gold toughness, because it's double duration, or it's double toughness damage reduction gold toughness, right? And then you have to get rid of all that gold toughness while you're regenerating it, by the way, through the other means you can regenerate toughness through. And then they have to actually damage your blue toughness. And you'll notice the difference as Veteran when your toughness is getting, like, if you get your toughness chipped a little bit and it goes below the 75% toughness, you are very vulnerable to damage on Veteran. So it's your goal to keep it capped and keep it tough, and that's one of the things that really sets Executioner's Stance back, is Executioner's Stance does not have any way of generating toughness and keeping it nice and high, which sucks because you are the sniper. You're going to be doing ranged duels with enemies. They're going to be plinking away at you, and the only thing you might have to keep your toughness high is catch your breath, which is not really that much, especially when gunners start to scale up in terms of damage. So Iron Will is absolutely S tier. I want to take a moment here to speak about Inspiring Presence, which is this little node in the here. Why is this here? Like, okay, not to spoil anything, but we just talked about Iron Will, absolute S tier, one of the most vital perks on the entire Veteran talent tree. On the other side, we have Demolition Team, which is also absurdly broken and one of the most S tier talents in the entire tree. And then right in the middle, as if there's a player in the world who says, I want to go this way, but I really don't want to pick up either of these insanely fucking broken talents, there's a 10% toughness replenishment for you in Allies and Coherency node. what is this? Why is this here? It feels like it was like placeholder and they forgot to swap it out with something. I don't understand. And this, if this, because I don't know, right? If this is actually toughness replenishment, it's like D tier, or it's like, D minus tier, because why would you're taking it over one of these other things. But if this is toughness replenishment in the same way that it was in the old Ogren tree, where it was actually just coherency toughness replenishment, then it's the most worthless stat in the entire game, and therefore it's the most worthless node. I mean, it's already the most worthless node in the entire game, but then it would be even more comically bad. So who knows why that little thing is there, but it always just tickles me. Like someone would be like, tactical awareness, and then, I'll just skip over taking either one of those talents and get down here, even though it's no extra points. Okay, like I was saying, Demolition Team, S, beyond S tier. Demolition Team is one of those things that like players often are sleeping on when they're at lower difficulties, but when you really start to scale into the mid-end game and you're killing lots of elites or lots of specials and they're like on the maps, I mean, there are as many elites and specials spawned in in a game as are in an entire game of all the enemies in like Space Marine 2, basically. Like there's legitimately like 500 to 700 in Havoc games across a 30 to 40 minute game. Like it gets absolutely wild out there. And if there's even like, let's say there's 300 or something like that, then a 5% chance on 300 is 15 grenades, right? You've generated 15 grenades for free just by your allies being near you and killing enemies, which they're already going to do. And this is one of the reasons why I gave that S tier rating up here to frag grenades and not to the other options. Well, not to smokes anyway, but because frag grenades have that 3 quantity, you can throw 2 or even throw all 3, and you'll have plenty of space in your bags for this thing to trigger multiple times. Because since it is 5%, it's completely random, sometimes it'll trigger a bunch. Sometimes you'll throw a grenade into a cluster of 20 shotgunners, and you'll get 3 grenades back, and sometimes you won't get any. But on average, you're going to be generating 1 grenade every 20 elite or specialist enemies you kill, which is going to happen all the freaking time. And it's not just you, by the way, it's your team as well can kill them. So you can just kind of exist passively and throw a ton of grenades. This is hugely broken in Havoc because there's so many enemies out there that are going to be triggering this, and yeah, it just makes the Veteran the best grenadier. I wish he had some more viable grenade options. Okay, coming down this way, Competitive Urge. This is just such a weird thing. Competitive Urge gives 2.5% chance of 20% base damage, 20% melee impact, and 20% suppression for 8 seconds whenever an ally kills an enemy. Okay, notably this is not you, so it's whenever an ally kills an enemy. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put this in their build, just because an ally has to kill 40 enemies on average for this to activate for 8 seconds. And then you're only really getting 20% base damage out of it, right? Who cares about 20% suppression? Because it doesn't affect melee enemies, and it's, it's suppression. It's nothing impactful. And speaking of impact, melee impact is not really generally that impactful for the ranged specialist class. So you're getting a 1 in every 40 enemies that your allies kill, you will get 20% extra damage for 8 seconds. That just does not ring to me as anything good. It's not dependable. The things that make good talents are like dependability, that you have this extra buff and it's going to be strong for you. So I'm going to rank this thing in the C tier. I just don't understand there, and also you just don't have the points to be picking this up, especially when you have stuff that's over here. Rending strikes, 10% rending to all weapons. This is B tier. It's fine. Like, rending is something. 10% rending is quite a bit if you're attacking crushers and maulers, but it's almost nothing when you're attacking any other enemies. So like, it's like, I think like a 1.5% damage increase on bosses, or 1.3% damage increase against bosses. So it's something, but it really only shines, and 10% rending is quite, like, it's a lot. Like, it does quite a bit of work. It makes a big difference when you're using like burns and bleeds and stuff against crushers and maulers specifically. But until they add more metal types of enemies to the game that stat as those as carapace enemies, there's no real reason to be bringing this, especially when in the third row here we just have a better option with Bring It Down, which is an S tier blessing or S tier talent. Bring It Down gives 20% damage against ogres and monstrosities. So there we go, 1/2 of the carapace enemies in the game are ogres, right? The Crusher is an ogre. The Mauler is not, but who cares? You can kill a Mauler anyway. An ogre is a Reaper, a Bulwark, or a Crusher, and monstrosities are all of the large bosses: the Slug, the Chaos Spawn, and the what's his name? The Plague Ogre, right? So these enemies are going to take 20%, or you're going to deal 20% extra damage to them, and that is really, really big because those are the enemies that have high health pools and therefore don't die in one hit already. So that extra damage isn't wasted, right? There are so many other enemies in the game that if this said like 20% damage against, you know, what, like Poxwalkers or something like that, it wouldn't be worth it because most of the time when you hit a Poxwalker, they're already dead to one hit anyway, and so this would be overkill. But these enemies have huge health bars, especially for monstrosities, especially for bosses, and so this extra damage is very much used, and it can allow you to hit some very important breakpoints. So this is definitely the one you'll want to pick up on this row if you're headed down here to focus target as your Keystone. Coming up here, we got Reciprocity, and I love breaking out the S tier in this part of the tree, but Reciprocity is disgusting. I fantasize about having this on Zealot because Zealot is already a crit god, and imagine having this on him. So Reciprocity gives you 5% critical hit chance for 8 seconds on successful dodge, stacks 5 times. So this is super brain dead to stack as well. A lot of people are like, well, I don't really dodge all that much. Well, first of all, what better time to start than now? But secondly, it is super easy to trigger a dodge. If an enemy is shooting anywhere near you and you just press the space bar or whatever and you just kind of dodge, the game will be like, oh, you dodged a bullet, you dodged there, you know, here you go, have a stack of Reciprocity. If enemies are just kind of like swinging at you in melee, you should be dodging anyway, but you're gonna get a stack of Reciprocity. And these things, it refreshes, so it's not like you have to like do it 5 times in 8 seconds or anything. It refreshes, so once every 8 seconds, just throw a dodge, and that's pretty easy to do. And so you'll have up to 25% critical hit chance. And so on my HUD, I have a tracker that tracks this stat to see when I'm at 5% or 5 stacks of this, and that lets me know, okay, now it's time to go ham with my recon lasgun, because thanks to Shock Trooper, I'm gonna have 25% additional ammo efficiency right now, and so I'm really gonna fucking pop off. Now this, combined with the node that's right below it, makes our melee dueling ability really, really strong too, because especially against bosses, you know, we're dodging their attacks, and we're back dodging against them, and then we're retaliating by stabbing them in the face. So that'll come back in a second. We've got Close Quarters Kill Zone, 15% close damage for 10 seconds on combat ability use. You know, I think this is like B tier probably. So it's 15% close quarters damage for 10 seconds. So let's assume that you're ulting, you're shouting once every 20 seconds. So this is like a 7.5% close damage increase, which isn't bad. It's just, you know, it's not always up, and it's only close damage, so it only applies to enemies that are right in your face anyway. And I think that, like, you know, I'll take this if I'm going for Onslaught and I don't have anything that I can do with Duck and Dive, but I think that in general it's not all that impressive to me. It's just kind of in the way, is how I feel. I wish Reciprocity was here so bad. That would be insane. Okay, then we got Duck and Dive, and Duck and Dive is getting an A tier because it has a very, very fun use case. Duck and Dive gives you 30% stamina on avoiding range attacks by dodging, sprinting, or sliding. And as some of you might be aware, there is a blessing on weapons, specifically on the Recon Lasgun has it, and so does like the Vrax, like the infantry auto gun, but the Recon Lasgun is probably the one most people use, right? And it is called Run and gun, that's what it's called. And so Run and Gun has synergy with Duck and Dive, because when you are sprinting with Run and Gun, if you have over 50% of your stamina, you count as dodging for all range attacks, so you can just run straight through enemy fire. And with Duck and Dive, if you dodge a range attack, you get 30% of your stamina, and so you see where this is going. If you have Run and Gun and Duck and Dive in your build, you can pull out your Recon Lasgun and run into enemy fire, and they cannot hit you, and you will be able to run forever because you'll dodge and replenish your stamina. So it has a really, really cool synergy and allows you just to run straight through enemy fire. Super, super cool. And Recon Lasgun also has the fastest movement speed at plus 0.4 in the game. It's shared with like dueling sword and stuff like that. So it's a really nice weapon to get some mobility with, especially if you have a slower moving primary. So Duck and Dive gets an A tier just for having that really cool synergy you can play with there. And you know, if you're better at dodging, sprinting, and sliding, it's just good in general. All right, come down here, Desperado, 10% melee critical hit chance and 25% melee finesse bonus. If it was just either of those blessings, it would still be an S tier, I think, honestly. If you think about it, like 50% melee finesse bonus is like what the duelist gets, basically. Well, he gets that, and I mean that blessing is, that talent's crazy for the zealot. But 10% melee critical hit chance on its own is a very, very big boost, considering we have 25% right here from dodging, most likely. This is huge. And then it gives you additional melee finesse. And remember that finesse weapons are just in right now. They're super in vogue. The dagger and the dueling sword are both weapons that benefit hugely over certain other weapons from having melee finesse bonus. It multiplies their damage in a big, big way because they already had big multipliers. So yeah, this is just super, super synergy with that stuff. And it makes these two talents right here, plus the trench fighter drill down here, make the veteran almost as good a melee combatant as the zealot. It's kind of crazy. All right, we got exploit weakness. Melee critical hits apply 10% brittleness to the target. Stacks 2 times in the last 5 seconds. I'm just going to give this a C tier. I think there's, first of all, no reason to take this because right here in the center is 25 toughness, and that is very, very juicy. We definitely want to be picking that up. But secondly, the qualifications to trigger this are like counterintuitive, right? 10% brittleness is something. It's not amazing, right? The Ogre can apply 40% brittleness with just bopping an enemy a couple times with light attacks, but notably that the Ogre can apply 40% brittleness or apply brittleness by just hitting with light attacks or hitting with any attacks at all. And the trigger for this one is getting melee critical hits. Now, what enemy is affected by brittleness? So first of all, there's only 2 enemies that are truly affected by brittleness in any real considerable way, and that's Crusher and Mauler. If you crit those enemies twice with your melee, what's the odds that they're not dead, right? Especially in the current dueling sword day and age, that's probably the weapon you have the best chance at getting melee critical hits with anyway, because of all of its synergy with crits. If you hit them twice with crits, how are they not dead already is what I'm asking. So yeah, they're going to be 20% brittle, but they're also going to maybe have like 10 HP left tops. So what's the point? Okay, going on over here, we've got Onslaught, another S tier, S for Onslaught. Onslaught applies up to 40% brittleness for 5 seconds to the targets on continuous hits. So this is just like if you just continuously tap, tap, tap a boss with your melee, or use your range attack on the boss, or specifically this is generally how you melt through like Crushers and Maulers with your Recon las gun or with your fast firing guns, because they just do take fuck all for damage when you normally shoot them, but this gives them 40% brittleness, and it stacks up very, very quickly. I mean, the Recon las gun, the fast firing Recon las gun, fires 20 rounds per second, so in 4/5 of a second you will have this fully stacked. And what this does is just buffs the amount of damage that they're taking, so you can stack this on them and it's going to buff the damage that they take from subsequent hits from the Recon, like the las gun's actual las fire, and it'll buff the damage they take from like any burns or bleeds they have on them. So really, really nice talent. And remember that brittleness is a team-wide thing. You are breaking that enemy's armor for everybody. So if you see a Crusher and you've got an ally who's in combat with it, just tag it for like 1 millisecond with your Recon las gun and it'll be fully brittled up and it'll be way easier for your teammate to dispatch. So very, very solid blessing. Skirmisher. Skirmisher is 6.25% to all base damage for 10 seconds after sprinting, stacks 4 times. So if you follow that math, we're talking about a 25% damage increase in total. However, I'm only going to be giving it a B tier because while it does have a good amount of damage and it lasts for a good duration, 10 seconds is a very solid duration for any buff in this game, and it stacks up to, 4 yada yada. It's the activation that's troubling. You have to sprint for like something like 2 full seconds before this starts to stack at all. And sliding and stuff like that does not count towards this sprinting. So you need to actually just like straight sprint. And you know, it lasts for 10 seconds and you can re-engage it, but unless you are doing a build that is specifically revolving around sprinting, so like if you were doing recon lasgun with duck and dive and you're sprinting through enemies and that's how you're avoiding attacks, and then you turn and you blast them with skirmisher, then it could be pretty good, right? But generally, when you're playing in this tree, you don't really want that. You want trench fighter drill instead to get down here to weapon specialist. I would love to see if this had that the time between when you start to sprint and when it starts to stack lowered by like cut in half or something like that. I would rate it higher, and I might even pick it like a good amount at the time. But as it stands, it's just more safe and viable to take 10% melee attack speed, which, as on every melee class it has, is just going to be an S tier. 10% melee attack speed makes us safer. It makes us do more DPS, 1.1 times DPS, right? 10% faster attacking on your hits, and also it lowers the gaps or shortens the gaps between attacks. So therefore you're going to get hit less. You'll be a safer fighter, and it synergizes super well because with 10% more attacks, we're fishing for crits. We're having more chances of getting crits with our 2 S tier crit perks up here. So yeah, a 10% attack speed is definitely S tier. And then we got to talk about our keystones. Let's talk about the best keystone first, which is Weapon Specialist. Weapon Specialist reads: gain range specialist on melee kills, stacks 10 times. Gain melee specialist on range kill, stacks 1 time. Okay, so what is this actually saying? What it's saying is when you get a melee kill, you're gonna charge up stacks, basically. And when you swap to your range weapon, you're gonna cash in those stacks for some effects. When you get kills with your range weapon and you swap to your melee weapon, even just it caps out at 1 range kill, and you swap to your melee weapon, you're going to cash in that buff and you're going to get some additional effects. Okay, so what happens when you get some melee kills and swap to your range weapon? Well, it activates range specialist, and for every stack that you got, so every melee kill that you got, you're going to get 2% range attack speed plus 33% range critical hit chance on your next shot per stack. So if you think about this, you could get 10 melee kills and get 20% range attack speed and have 500% chance to crit, or whatever that would, 300% chance to crit. But that's pointless. That's too much chance to crit. The most efficient way to play this right would be to get 3 melee kills, and then you'll have a guaranteed crit on your next shot of your ranged weapon. So you get 3 melee kills, and you swap your ranged weapon, and blam, guaranteed range crit, which could be very, very powerful depending on what sort of weapon you're using. And then when you get that range kill, then you can swap back to your melee weapon and it'll activate your melee specialist effect, which gives you 15% melee attack speed, 10% dodge speed, and dodge distance, which lasts 10 seconds. So the melee, both of these are very, very powerful, right? And the thing I love about this is it is such a creative and it's both creative and interesting to play around, but it also can be a keystone you don't have to think about a whole lot, right? You can just choose this keystone and not even worry about these effects that are going on and just enjoy the buffs that it gives to you. Like on some builds, like probably the most powerful builds, which are just like flexing with plasma gun and just swapping back and forth between that and dueling sword, you're not really worried about these ranged effects when you get the melee kills. You're mostly worried about, hey, I got a range kill when I blasted with the plasma gun a second ago, and I have this extra attack speed. And so between this attack speed, 15% here and 10% here, we have 25% attack speed, which is a fuck ton of attack speed in this game. And then dodge speed and dodge distance is also really, really big. It makes your dodges much more snappy and they go way farther, 10% farther. And this buff lasts for a long time. So it makes you a way safer melee fighter as well. And so yeah, like you can play like that and not even worry about the blessings, or you could do as God intended and use like a double-barreled shotgun and get your melee kills and then swap to double-barreled shotgun and get a guaranteed crit blast. And this synergizes extra well with Always Prepared, which is definitely an S tier. This is going to be S tier. I know it's not, probably Web Specialist probably isn't S tier. Actually, no, it's probably S tier in terms of all keystones in the game, right? It's up there with Heavy Hitter and stuff like that. It is really, really good. And then Always Prepared is also S tier. Always Prepared, every time you get a melee kill and swap to your range weapon, it'll reload some ammo into your magazine from your reserve. And this replenishes 3.3% of your missing ammo in your clip from your reserve rounded up. So at minimum, it will replenish 1 bullet, no matter what your magazine size is. So if you're using a revolver and you shoot 1 bullet and then you switch to your melee and you get a melee kill and you switch back to the revolver, it will replenish that 1 bullet, because that's 3.3% rounded up. It probably replenished like 0.001 of a bullet, but it rounds up, so it gives you a 1 always guaranteed. So this means for weapons that have very low total overall ammo capacity, especially in their magazine, it's going to generate a lot of value. So stuff like your double-barreled shotgun and your revolver and stuff like that gets a ton of value out of it. It also benefits plasma gun hugely, because if you take this and you're swapping between plasma guns, like hyper efficient shots, excuse me, and actually getting some melee kills mixed in there with your, general melee prowess that this tree gives, then you are never really gonna have to reload. You'll have to reload like a couple of times a game tops if you're doing this efficiently. So this just is such a nice way to sustain your ammo in your magazine, and I would love to see some more weapons that could benefit from this. If there was a grenade launcher for the veteran, this would be sick. This would be disgusting with that, and I would love to see that. Okay, Fleeting Fire. This is, however, going to get a D tier. Fleeting Fire gives activating range specialist grants 20% reload speed for 5 seconds. So that means when you pull out your ranged weapon after you get the melee kill, you get 20% reload speed. Who the fuck is getting a melee kill and then swapping to the ranged weapon real quick just to reload it? It only lasts for 5 seconds. So it's like, what are you doing? Also, you literally just took Always Prepared, which means that you just got a melee kill and it reloaded some of your mag for you. Why do you want to reload again? It's so bizarre you have to go through this to get this, and this is such a nothing perk. Down here though, on your toes, this is another S tier thing. Activating melee specialist and range specialist replenishes 20% toughness, 3-second cooldown for each. So let me break this down for you with a little scenario. So you got this weapon specialist thing, you got on your toes, and you're hacking through enemies. So you get a melee kill. So let's say your toughness is 0%, right? You get a melee kill, and then you swap to your ranged weapon. That gives you 20% toughness. The timer starts on the melee kill right then. Then you get a ranged kill, and you swap back to your melee weapon. So then you get another 20% toughness. You're at 40% toughness, and however long that took, let's assume that takes 1.5 seconds to do that little combination right there. Then in another 1.5 seconds, you can do that again. So every 3 seconds, you can gain 40% toughness. That's 13% of your toughness every second, just for swapping back and forth between melee and ranged effectively. It's a huge burst of toughness, and remember, this is a percentage replenishment toughness, so if you are golded up, if you have your gold toughness from using Shout, this is going to keep you in the gold. It's going to keep bumping your toughness back up. Say you get chipped down and it goes to blue, the next time you get a melee kill and swap to range, it's going to bump you back up instantly and put you back in gold, which is one of the things that this veteran struggles with, is sustaining their toughness from chip damage outside of when Shout is active. So really, really solid, and it makes this even that much better. The only lament I have is it's all the way down here, and there's so many other good things to get. Invigorated, activating melee specialist restores 20% stamina. I just don't think there's any reason to take this. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a... No, I'll give it a C. Let's give it a C. It's fine. Like, 20% stamina, what are you doing with the stamina? I guess you could use it to sprint more, or sprint slide, or push, or something like that. So sometimes you are out of stamina, and it's okay to get it back, but it's definitely not okay to get conditioning. Activating melee specialist grants 25% stamina cost reduction for 3 seconds. Okay, like, what the fuck? First of all, this is a 3-second buff. They obviously gave no fucking shits what was down here, right? They're like, no one is gonna take this fucking garbage. They knew when they made this that this was garbage. 25% stamina cost reduction for 3 seconds. So for the next 3 whole seconds, during which time I can push, what, 4 times? Those 4 times that I push, one of them is going to be free, basically. Like, that's what you're telling me here. You're telling me that this person is getting a range kill, swapping to their melee weapon, getting 20% of their stamina back, first of all, and then they're going to, what, shove or sprint a bunch, and it's going to be like, oh my god, it's so much cheaper. Like, even if this was 50% stamina cost reduction, it would be nothing. In order for this to be viable at all, or have any value, it would be grants 100% stamina cost reduction for 3 seconds. But even then, it's 3 seconds. How much fucking stamina can you possibly spend in 3 seconds after you're swapping for your ranged weapon? Absurd. I have no idea what the use case of this perk is, and it's so far away from the top of the tree that there's no way you have enough points to get here and waste it on that. All right, Focus Target. Focus Target is getting a solid A tier as a general as a general blessing or a general keystone. I think it's a good keystone. The problem with the keystones on the veteran, though, is that unless you are going for a build that is specifically tied to weapon specialist and the buffs that can provide you, unless you're a very skilled player who likes to swap back and forth like this, there is a very real temptation to take no keystone. And this is something I addressed in my previous video about the veteran's talent tree, where I just like kind of was generally assessing the problems that he has. And the focus target keystone doesn't really do anything to help that, because focus target, while it is kind of an interesting thing, by the way, focus target, gain a stack of focus target every 2 seconds, stacks 5 times, so up to 10 stack or up to 5 stacks, right? So 10 seconds total to get all the stacks. Tagging an enemy applies the focus target stacks to them, causing them to take plus 4% additional damage for each stack, and resets you to 1. So you'll always have at least 1, so you'll get 4% damage on every enemy if you just spam attack every time. And this means that the enemy gets a 1.2 times damage taken multiplier, which is very nice, but you have to wait around 10 seconds for that to happen. And the problem with this is it just generally, it only applies to the target that you put the focus target on. And when we have a situation like Havoc, there are so many targets that you can tag and can put this on. Like there's a pack of 5 crushers. If the pack of 5 crushers comes at you, you can tag one of them and you'll get a 20% extra damage to them. And then they'll die. And then you won't have any more focus target. You'll have maybe 1 or 2 stacks for the next one that comes in tops. It doesn't make it any better when you talk about focused fire down here. Now, focused fire, I'm going to give this a B. Focused fire increases your max stacks to 8, so you could ostensibly put 32% extra damage taken on an enemy, and this is mostly usable on bosses. But remember, if you just use your stacks on something, say that like you accidentally tag something else when you meant to tag the boss, which happens a lot, like a bulwark or something will be in the way and the game will be like, oh, you meant to tag that, not that huge fucking boss. It'll put it on them, and then 8 stacks times 2 seconds, it means you have to wait 16 seconds to put the stacks on the correct enemy, which really sucks. I wish that this, instead of saying your focus target max stacks increased to 8, instead just said your stacks do 6.5% additional or 5.5% additional damage instead of 4%. It would give the same effect, but it wouldn't take 1.6 times as long to stack up fully, because this is like an upside and a downside. You have to be using it very judiciously to get this. And this also, like, playing with focus target means that you cannot just tag stuff all willy-nilly. You can't tag a demon host for your team and say, look out for that demon host. You can't tag like, oh, I just saw like a trapper run all the way over there, because that is wasting your focus target stacks. That's blowing them, and then who knows what, a boss might show up right then and you need that extra boosted damage. We also have redirect fire and target down. I just don't think that target down is worth anything. When an enemy you have tagged dies, replenish 5% toughness and 5% stamina for each stack of focus target applied to you allies incoherency. I mean, like, on average, you tag this enemy and it replenishes 25% of everyone's toughness and stamina. I can't really see this being something that people would take. Now, they do generally take redirect fire a little bit more. This gives about a 7% buff to the whole team. It gives, if an enemy you have tagged dies, grant 1.5% damage for each stack of focus target applied to you and all allies in coherency lasts 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, you can apply another fully 5 stacked one, right? So you kill that enemy pretty much instantly and start to stack the next one. And so for that 10 seconds, you will get 1.5 times 5 stacks. So that's 7.5% damage, which is not nothing. It's pretty okay. My problem with this, again, is that this is all the way down here at the bottom of the tree, so it's very hard to get to and invest points to get here, because remember, you need to be picking up all this other blue stuff. All this other blue stuff is so juicy and so good and makes your build so strong. And then you have focus target, which, remember, keystones are supposed to be defining to your build. They're supposed to give you an additional set of tools to play with that makes certain types of weapons and certain playstyles play better. The whole focus target keystone is pretty much nothing in terms of like class identity, right? It kind of is supposed to make you this shot caller, like, oh, kill that target over there or whatever. And I think that was the goal they were going for, like a commissar sort of build where you're like, you know, pointing with your little commander hat or whatever the fuck that shit is on there. But in reality, it doesn't make you play any different. It doesn't give you any class fantasy. Not in the same way the weapon specialist does, where you're getting in there like the Doom guy, and you're fucking like blasting him with a shotgun and swapping to the melee weapon and sawing him in half, and then you swap back to the range weapon and you got some free ammo reloaded in there. Like, that's a cool idea, and the weapon specialist Keystone makes that available, makes that happen, and it makes you stronger by using it. Focus target does not make you stronger. It does not make your actual character any stronger at all. It gives them an additional thing they can do that makes one enemy every 10 seconds weaker, but that's it. And that, I think, is a big failure. You know, it can lead to some cool boss killing stuff, but couldn't spending an additional 2 points somewhere else in the tree also give you a similar power? And I think a good argument could be made that yes, 2 points elsewhere in the veteran tree, when there's so many good things in the veteran tree, could be very well spent elsewhere. And I think that's a big struggle with the veteran tree in general, is that these keystones, especially this one we're about to talk about, just are not viable in the current state of the game. And there's so many other good talents that you're very tempted to take those instead. All right, then we got, oh boy, Marksman's Focus. Marksman's Focus. Ranged weak spot kills grant 3 stacks of focus, up to 10 max stacks, sprinting, sliding, and walking remove stacks. Each stack of focus grants 7.5% range finesse strength and 1% reload speed. Ranged weak spot kills let you move without losing stacks for 6 seconds. Ranged weak spot hits let you move without losing stacks for 3 seconds. Okay, so what is the problem with this? Well, firstly, this whole node, or this whole keystone, is focused around sharpshooting. I mean, look at the node, right? Look at the art design on it, right? It's a guy with a fucking sniper rifle, crying out loud. We don't even have scopes like that in the game, but there it is in thumbnail. Now, so it wants you to snipe, but this game is not sniping friendly. What does the game do to you if you're hanging out in the back line and your team is up ahead of you and you're trying to snipe? Well, it spawns trappers and dogs to harass the shit out of you while you're trying to stand still. It throws gas bombs and fire grenades and stuff at you. It shoots at you or demands you. And it generally, like, staying mobile in this game is how you survive. It's how you win games. This is an aggressive game where you're moving around a lot. Marksman's Focus was designed in an era of the game where I don't think that they understood what eventually would become the player deathball comp, right? Where it's like 2 Ogrins and a Zealot and a veteran, and they're just like shouting and chorusing and bludgeoning their way through the level. Where is the sniper's role in that? So, like, yeah, you can't just stand in the back line and snipe stuff. And even if you could, let's think about, like, you know, weapons that are really strong with this blessing, like, you know, extra reload speed and range finesse strength would benefit them a lot. Well, I'm thinking immediately about the revolver, because I used to play this with the revolver. Now, you can stand still and snipe stuff with the revolver, and I think it's really cool that you get this, like, you know, it doesn't take your buffs from you for, you know, when you're getting the ranged weak spot. So there's an incentive to hit ranged headshots here. But the revolver already does a fuck ton of damage on ranged headshots, and because it's a range finesse strength multiplier, it's going to take weapons that already benefit from getting range headshots, you know, and benefit them even more. Weapons that don't get big bonuses from hitting headshots, they don't really care about this bonus at all. So it's gonna benefit pretty much the wrong subset of weapons. There's a subset of weapons that is good at headshots and doesn't need the extra damage, and there's a subset of weapons that is really good at headshots that wants extra damage but is not a sniper rifle at all. And so what you end up using with this is you end up using the infantry auto guns, or like the recon las gun or something that has a pretty decent headshot multiplier, and then you just spam the gun, and you spam it at roughly head level, and you're hoping to get range weak spot hits that let you just keep moving, or at the very, you know, maybe you'll get a range weak spot kill and you can just move for 6 seconds. And that's the only real way this thing is played with any viability at all, because it's giving you a bunch of damage that you don't really need, because you're already shooting the enemy in the head, and shooting enemies in the head in this game is pretty much a death sentence already. So, like, I don't know, if there was like enemies that needed more headshot damage to really take out, sure, but yeah, this is not like a sniper's paradise of a game. You know, a person who can aim with a revolver is still going to kill gunners in one hit, even without this. So what's the point of taking this then? So, okay, let's talk about this. So first of all, I think this is C tier. I think it's kind of like it's something, but it's not like D tier bad, but like it's pretty damn bad. It just needs a complete rework and overhaul in terms of its power level. And then we've got Tunnel Vision. 5% toughness replenishment for each stack of focus. In addition, weak spot kills restore 10% stamina. So this is not getting 5% of your toughness back every time you pick up a stack of focus. What this is multiplying your toughness that you gain for each stack of focus. So if you have 10 stacks, you get 50% toughness replenishment, and therefore every time you get a range kill with Out for Blood, instead of 5% toughness, you'll get 7.5% toughness. It's just like the Ogryn's Feel No Pain, this Keystone on the Ogryn now, where it's just going to multiply all your toughness gain by 1.5. So it's something, but it's not going to make you take any less damage. You still need to have some other way to sustain your toughness. So I'm just going to give that, I don't know, I'll give it a C tier, I guess. That seems fine. It's like, don't pick this. All right, Camouflage. Gain 1 stack of focus every 0.75 seconds while standing still or walking while crouched. Well, I mean, okay. I mean, come on. Like, first of all, how hard is it to get the stacks for this thing, right? You only need to get 10 stacks. The max is 10 stacks. You only need 3 kills to get to 9 stacks, and this is going to give you a stack almost every full second. So like, yeah, you can gain stacks when you haven't gotten kills in a while, but like, you're just standing around or you're crouch walking. That is so funny to me that they included like crouch walking. Like, players are going to be crouch walking between boxes to be the sniper for the team. I think just because this, like, the image of this is so funny and stupid that someone is just standing there waiting for their thing to stack up before they start shooting, right? It's just ludicrous. Long Range Assassin increases maximum stacks from focus from 10 to 15. I mean, if it wasn't dying at 75% range finesse strength and maybe 112.5% range finesse strength, they'll do it. Like, this just seems complete overkill, and these stacks fall off so fucking quick. It doesn't matter if you have 15 stacks. This is not like Disrupt Destiny for the which is like a way better version of this for the Psycho Tree, where it's like the stacks only fall off once every 4 seconds. If you fucking budge your little tootsies at all when you have these stacks, they're just all gonna fall off like the spaghetti's falling out of your pockets. Like, they fall off in 1 or 2 seconds. 10 stacks will fall off. So 3 seconds, all 15 stacks will fall off, and then you have even more to gain. So again, another situation where instead of increasing the max stacks, they should have just increased the effects or given it an additional effect. So I think this is another D tier. And then 15% rending when at or over 10 stacks of focus. I mean, fuck off. Like, first of all, you have to be at 10 stacks of focus. Rending is only effective against armored targets, so only maulers and crushers are affected by this at all in any way. Pretty much, more or less. 15% rending is only going to affect those 2 types of enemies. It only happens when you're at or over 10 stacks of focus. So you would basically have to have camouflage for this to work. You'd have to stand around and wait to get, like, hold on guys, don't shoot yet, just wait, hold on. Only 7.5 seconds of standing around for me to get fully stacked up so that I can get 15% rending and do barely any more. Like, if you need 15% rending, just fucking take this talent right here, dude. Just take 10% rending. It's basically the same exact fucking thing. It gives almost no more damage to take 15% instead of 10% rending, and it's only usable, again, against maulers and crushers. This is just such a bizarrely designed Keystone. I cannot wrap my head around it, and I think it needs a full overhaul. And like, it can't be a sniper. It cannot be a sniper focus thing anymore, because no one is sniping in this game. Sniping is not a viable way of playing the game. You cannot have someone standing all the way in the back lines while everyone else is on the front lines doing their stuff. And conversely, you can't have someone just sniping while everyone else just does fuck all and stands around, because it's boring as shit. So please rework this. Please gut it, tear it down to the ground, and build something else new. Okay, and that is everything, ladies and gents. So we've got a ton of S tier blessings down here, and we've got a smattering of them up here. And so here's your big takeaways, that if you already saw my little snippeted 12-minute version of this spiel the other day, I'm just going to say a lot of the same stuff, but basically the veteran is a solved class. There are so many S tier, very obviously S tier blessings, such as, or talents, such as free grenades every minute, such as how good shredder grenades are, how good survivalist is, and shout being as having absolute full spectrum dominance in terms of abilities and how pitiful the other abilities are comparatively. And all of these S tier things down here that are super easy to path to, 90% of, 95, probably even higher percent of builds that are made by players who like know what they're doing at fucking all have like almost all of these in them. And so it leaves you very, very little room for wiggle room. It's very similar to the Zealot in that respect, where like there are certain talents you have to pick up. Like you have to go on the top right of the tree, and you probably like have to take Until Death and Duelist for real damage. So like it really limits your choices outside of that, and it's so limited on choices, and there's so many other good options that like choosing 2 of the Keystones in this class are almost like not even considered. And if you're not choosing something that Weapon Specialist benefits directly, then you wouldn't choose that either. I just think that for how complex and interwoven this tree looks on paper, there's actually not that many choices, because every one of, if we know, every one of your main choices, your Blitz, your Aura, your ability, and your Keystone, there is one that is super, super dominant. There's one that's way better and gives you way more benefits than the other 2 do, and it's not even close. So if that's the case, then you're always going to path through them, and that means you can only pick up stuff that's only a certain distance off those paths. So I think that the main things that I really want to see for the veteran class for rework is they need a full rework of Marksman's focus. They need some sort of change in terms of what focus target does. I think Weapon Specialist, I like it. They can keep it as it is. They change these D tier things to something else though, because they're fucking shit. Then they need a full rework of Infiltrate and Executioner's Stance. Make them good. We need to bring down Shout. It's too good. You wouldn't be able to make anything else. It's as good as it. And it's just like, you know, it's just so brain dead at this point. It's like a no-brainer choice. And then just generally like shifting this stuff up and moving it around, because and fixing these fucking grenades and these auras too. Like make those like actually do something. Like crack grenades, just a couple of tweaks in crack grenades would be better. Smoke grenades need a whole fucking hell of a lot of help. But like moving this stuff around, like getting it broken up, because there's so many clusters of really powerful talents that are all right together. Like there's nothing. I don't know if they thought about this when they were making it, because they like put all these super, super grossly powerful talents together, and then they put a bunch of really crap talents together. And so there's like areas that you just avoid, like the plague, like this over here, and there's areas you're like, oh fuck yes, I'm going right through there, because there's so many S's. Like these are amazing. So anyway, that's the takeaway, guys. If you watched this far, thank you so much for sticking it out with me. I know it was a long haul, but I really enjoy these videos. I love looking at the colorful little letters. It does remind me of the side of a fridge with the little spelling stuff. And let's see, did I write ass or ass backwards right here? I don't see anything really funny. I did write CBD up there. A CBS. There we go. CBS. That's a thing that we all recognize. CBS. AC. BSA, cab. That's, yeah, there's no funny curse words in this one, so sorry guys. If you see a curse word in here, you know, that I'm missing, please let me know down in the comments. Type your funniest curse word, and I'll see you next time. Appreciate you. Mystery out. Bye.